I'm available if you have any questions.
Okay. Anyone in the public wish to speak on item number 1?
Second.
I got a motion from Mr. Corn, second by Mr. Maniscalco. All in favor of that motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, Mr. Vera, we do item number 1.
My pleasure, Mr. Chair. I move an ordinance being presented for second reading and adoption ordinance relating to an area rezoning in the general vicinity of 1910 North Ola Avenue, 1810, 1812, 1901, 1903, 2003, 2006, and 2008. North Highland Avenue, 119, 201, 203, and 215 West Oak Avenue, 1906 and 1912 North Tampa Street, and 202 West 7th Street in the city of Tampa, Florida, from zoning district classification PDA, Plan Development Alternative, RM24, residential multifamily, CG, commercial general, and CI, commercial intensive, to zoning district classification PDA, Plan Development Alternative, providing for notice, providing an effective date.
I got a motion from Mr. Vera, second by Mr. Miranda. Roll call vote.
Yes.
Cohen,
Yes.
Maniscalco,
Yes.
Reddick,
Yes.
Capeen,
Yes.
Miranda,
Yes.
and Viera.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Okay. We go to item number 2.
Good evening, Council. Kristen Mora, Legal Department. This also went to the CRA this morning. This is a development agreement that coincides with the area-wide rezoning. You just moved forward. As I mentioned, there is a substitute that has been sent to the clerk's office. It's just to recognize that change schedule for the transportation and the ownership and maintenance agreement, so it's incorporated and everything agrees with one another. I'm available if you have any questions regarding this.
Okay. Any questions from council? Okay. Anyone in the public wish to speak on item number 2?
Move to close. Second.
Got a motion from Mr. Miranda, second by Mr. Maniscalco. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Move the resolution. It's a substitute resolution.
Yeah. All right. Did we get a second?
Second.
All right. Got a motion from Mr. Maniscalco, second by Mr. Suarez. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Motion carried.
Motion carried unanimously.
Okay. All right. The other items is 6 o'clock. And so we got 20 minutes.
Okay.
So we'll stand in recess for 20 minutes. All right, we're going to reconvene this meeting. Roll call.
Suarez. Here. Cohen.
Here.
Maniscalco.
Here.
Capeen. Miranda.
Here.
Viera. And Reddick.
Here. All right.
Chair, if I could, I'd like to open up meetings, items 4 through 14, I believe. 7? Yeah, 4 through 14.
Okay. We got a motion from Mr. Suarez, second by Mr. Corn. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right. Item number 3, a staff report.
Good evening again, Council. Kristen Moore, Legal Department. Here on a staff report regarding the automatic reductions to save 24-inch and larger trees that was discussed on the December 6th staff report. The changes you see in front of you has a couple of definitions. One being a specimen tree that is a
24-inch or larger tree that would otherwise, it's one of the species that would in the future qualify as grand. We've also added a definition for tree removal zone eligible lots. Those are the lots that will be eligible for the tree removal zone, as well as the new automatic setback reductions. Thank you. The definition has a exception for the Parkland Estates, which we discussed on the December 6th item. Parkland Estates has a state law that makes them very unique in terms of application of these various code provisions. So we felt that they could be accepted safely from these provisions, and that is included in this draft.
Yeah. Ms. Moore, just to be clear, if we were to move forward with this, we have to transmit this to the Planning Commission, correct?
That's correct.
That would be our next move.
That's correct,
All right,
Councilman.
thank you.
And just going very briefly through these changes, it does have an opportunity for a design exception 2 for a 25% side yard, with the criteria that it has to be in order to preserve a specimen or grand tree, as discussed on December 6th. And then the final change is an automatic reduction of 25% for front and corner yards, 1 foot for side yards, 40% reduction for rear yards, and a 10% increase of building height, again, in order to save a specimen or grand tree. So these are significant reductions. They will be automatic without any notice or an opportunity for appeal. So if this meets council's if this meets what council wants to do, then your next step, as Councilman Cohen noted, would be to transmit this to the Planning Commission this evening.
All right, any questions from council? Okay.
Yeah, I would move to transmit.
All right, got a motion from Mr. Cohen, seconded by Mr. Maniscalco. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go to public hearing, 6 o'clock. In the house cleaning you need to do?
Yes, sir. Mary San Diego Land Development Coordination, items 9 and 10. They did not effectively complete their notice, so they will have to be renoticed. I know they're planning on notifying for the February 14th City Council evening meeting. Other than that, all agenda items are ready to be heard.
Okay.
Motion to remove, please.
So,
Second. 9 and 10.
all right, got a motion from Mr. Miranda, seconded by Mr. Maniscalco. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right. Anyone going to speak on item 4 through 14, please stand to be sworn.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay, item number 4.
Mary San Diego, item number 4 is REZ 18109. It's a rezoning request for the property at 1745 West Hillsborough Avenue from Commercial General and RS50 to Commercial General.
Good evening, council members. Jennifer Malone with your Planning Commission staff. This is located in the University Planning District. It is served by, there's a bus stop about approximately 250 feet away at this corner, right here. It's an evacuation zone D. This is the aerial. It's located along Hillsborough Avenue. There's a Wawa right across the street. This is a storage facility. So there's a great commercial presence along Hillsborough Avenue already. And the adopted future land use is community commercial 35, which is that red that we see along Hillsborough Avenue. As we move north from the subject site, this is residential 20 and then residential 10, providing that transition. Staff did find this consistent with the comprehensive plan, as CG is an allowable use or allowable zoning district in that community commercial 35, and this is along the commercial corridor. We found that it would be comparable and compatible. Thank you so much. I'm available for any questions.
As I stated, Mary San Diego. This is an application to rezone the property from Commercial General and RS50 to Commercial General. The subject property is in green. It's on West Hillsborough Avenue, and it backs up against West Mohawk Avenue. It actually currently has split zoning. So the southern half is already Commercial General. The northern half is in the RS50 zoning district. They're wanting to have the entire property zoned Commercial General in order to use the entire property for commercial general uses. Here's the subject property from Hillsborough Avenue. This is across the street, the Wawa. To the east, further to the east, and then back next door to the west of the subject property. As you can see, these are a series, it's a commercial corridor, another commercial use. This is the subject property, the back of it from Mohawk. And then these are the residential houses that face the back of the property along Mohawk. As I stated, this is a Euclidean rezoning district, so there are no waivers or site plans to approve tonight. Any development that was to happen on this property would have to comply with all CG standards as well as all development standards found in Chapter 27 and applicable sections of the City of Tampa Code. The overall property is a little over half an acre. It's about 5 lots. Down from the intersection of West Hillsborough Avenue and West Rome Avenue intersection. And it has 115 feet of lot width, both on Hillsborough and Mohawk. It meets the minimum lot size and the minimum lot width standards for that zoning district. And the development review and compliance staff found it consistent with the City of Tampa Code of Ordinances. Do you have any questions for me at this time?
Any question from council?
Thank you.
All right, applicant? The applicant?
Hi, good evening. Rui Londono. I'm here to rezone the property as they showed there. And the zoning is, we are requesting to rezone the half north portion that is RS50 to CG commercial general. And that's all the request. If you have any question. Right now, this portion is vacant lot.
Any question from council? Anyone in the public wish to speak on item number 4? And a motion from Mr. Miranda, seconded by Mr. Maniscalco. All in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed? All right. Mr. Miranda.
Thank you, Chairman. Item number 4, file number Z18-109. Ordinance being presented for first reading consideration. An ordinance rezoning property in the general vicinity of 1745 West Hillsborough Avenue in the city of Tampa, Florida, and more particularly described in Section 1 from zoning district classification RS50 residential single family and CG commercial general to CG commercial general, providing an effective date.
Second.
All right, got a motion from Mr. Miranda, seconded by Mr. Maniscalco. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
Motion carried with Capeen being absent at vote. Second reading and adoption will be on February 7th, 2019 at 9:30 a.m.
Okay. Item number 5.
Mary Samaniego, item number 5 is REZ 18111. It's for the property located at 3613 and West Anderson Avenue. It's a rezoning request from RS60 to RS50.
Jennifer Malone with your Planning Commission staff. This is in South Tampa. It's an evacuation zone B. Gadsden Park is the closest public recreational facility, and we have a HART route that connects the subject site to downtown Tampa. This is the subject site right here. This is Anderson Avenue. It's just south of Inner Bay, and then here's Southdale Mabry Highway. I have a Circle K on the corner and a Dollar General in the vicinity, and then these are single-family detached homes. Here's the future land use. The adopted future land use is residential 10. Along Southdale Mabry Highway, we have that community commercial 35. That's that pink representing the commercial uses. This is recreational open space, which is, I believe, Gadsden Park, to the east of the subject site. And there are some light industrial uses to the south. That's that gray color. Staff did find this consistent with the comprehensive plan. The residential 10 allows for those 10 dwelling units per acre as the density. If this request is approved today, the subject site would be at an overall density of 6.9 units per acre. We did find that this would be comparable and compatible with the surrounding development pattern and compatible with that future land use, the underlying future land use designation. Thank you.
Mary Samaniego. Here's a zoning map of the property. The subject property is in green. As you can see, it's in the RS60 zoning district. As you can also see, there have been a series of rezonings in this area to reduce the lot size down below the RS60 standards. Ooh. Here is the subject property. We're going to go east and then kind of, let me show you. Here's the subject property. We're going to go east and then cross the street and kind of look at the surrounding houses. So here's your subject property. These are all taken from the street. This is at 3611. It's to the east. Further to the east. Now we cross the street. We're coming back towards the subject property. You can see the spacing of the houses between each other. Still across the street. Single-family houses. Then this is to the west of the property, and then next door directly to the west. Whenever we have a rezoning request to go from RS60 to RS50, we do a map that shows the development pattern in the immediate area. For this study, the red are commercial lots, so those were not included, and then the yellow color are townhomes, so those weren't included in this overall study. A total of 112 lots were analyzed, 27 of which are equal to or greater than 60-foot wide lots, leaving 73, or a majority of which, less than 60 feet wide. Of the subject block, which is this entire block, there are 41 lots, 22 of which are 60 feet wide or greater, and then the remaining 78% are less than 60 feet wide. For the subject block face, which is this northern side of Anderson Avenue, there are 21 total lots, 19 of which are 60 feet wide or wider, and the remaining 81% is less than 60 feet wide. And then for this block, the 3600 block, being the block face as well as across the street, there are 40 lots, 33% are 60 feet wide or larger, and then the remaining 67% are less than 60 feet wide. As you can see, in all four categories that were analyzed, everyone had an overwhelming majority of lots less than 60 feet wide. The total lot is 12,500 square feet, and it is 100 feet wide, so if approved with the RS50 zoning district, it could be split into 2 lots. This is Euclidean rezoning, so there's no site plan to review and no waivers to consider. There are no additional comments from the development review compliance staff. Any development that were to occur on this property would have to comply with all applicable zoning standards of the RS50 zoning district. After the analysis, the development review compliance staff reviewed the application and found it consistent with the overall development pattern as well as the City of Tampa Code of Ordinances.
Any questions with staff? All right.
Thank you.
Applicant.
Good evening, Council. Steve McElhaney. I'm representing Karina Hess, who's the petitioner on this project. Basically, this restores the 1946 original plat that were 50-foot lots, and in this case, it will allow for the redevelopment of these two particular lots we're requesting, and there will be no waivers because it's Euclidean zoning. And as the staff has pointed out, in all 4 categories, including block face, area, the street frontage, are all in excess of 50-foot development. Like 70, I think 70% are all developed in 50-foot configurations. This lies between Del Mabry and Himes, just south of Inter Bay Boulevard, and the area has experienced a great deal of infill and redevelopment recently. So basically, the staff is recommending that this is consistent on both the Planning Commission and the city staff, and I'll be happy to answer any questions for you regarding this project, but we respectfully request your approval.
Any questions for the applicant? Anyone in the public wish to speak on item number 5? I got a motion from Mr. Miranda, second by Mr. Cohen. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Mr. Maniscalco, would you read item number 5?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I have an ordinance rezoning property in the general vicinity of 3613 West Anderson Avenue in the city of Tampa, Florida, and particularly described in section 1 from zoning district classification RS60 residential single family to RS50 residential single family, providing an effective date.
Second.
All right, got a motion by Mr. Maniscalco, second by Mr. Corner. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion carried with Capeen being absent at vote. Second reading and adoption will be held on February 7th, 2019 at 9:30 a.m.
Okay.
Thank you very much, council.
Item number 6.
Mary Samaniego, item number 6 is REZ 18114. It's a rezoning request for 3511 West Empedrado Street from RM16 to RM18.
Good evening, council. This is located in South Tampa. It's in evacuation zone C. Corona Park is the closest public recreational facility. I have an aerial for you. I'm not great at pronouncing the street name, but here it is, right here. I also have South Hines Avenue and West Beta Bay Boulevard to the south, and this is the subject site. This is a church to the south along West Beta Bay Boulevard, and we also have some commercial uses in this area. This portion of the street, we have some attached townhomes, some duplexes, kind of a mix of those residential types, which is reflected on our future land use map. It's residential 20, which allows for that medium density residential. To the north, that orange is residential 10. I have community mixed use 35 along West Beta Bay Boulevard, and then the yellow is residential 6. The residential 20 category does provide for that sensitive transition between this residential 10 and the community commercial 35 as we move north from West Beta Bay Boulevard. And this rezoning request is within that intent of that residential 20, keeping with that medium density residential category. So we did find this consistent. We also found that it would further the policy direction to make an effective use of underutilized land and increase the available housing in this area of the city. And I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Mary Samaniego, for the record, this is the zoning map of the subject property is in green. It's currently in the RM16 zoning district. They're requesting to go to the RM18 zoning district. Because of the size of the lot, it's only 0.11 acres, and they currently have 2 dwelling units on the site. They're below the acreage that they need to have 2 conforming. The second unit is non-conforming. And per the non-conforming chapter, they're severely limited on what they can do to that second unit. They can't expand it, they can't enlarge it, they can only do basic repairs. With the RM18 zoning district, that would give them full 2 dwelling units so they could exercise their property rights to fully execute a second dwelling unit as opposed to getting locked into the existing structure and the existing unit that's there now. Here's the subject property. Here's directly to the east. Here across the street is a very large church facility. Let me show you. It's this entire block on the south side of Empedrado. And then to the west is another single-family house. Again, this is including rezoning. Any development, if this rezoning were to be approved, would have to comply with all of the RM18 zoning standards. The development review and compliance staff found it consistent with the City of Tampa Code of Ordinances. Any questions?
Questions for staff?
Nope? Okay.
All right. Petitioner?
Good evening, council members. My name is Michael Satin. I own the property at 3511 West Empedrado Street in question, and I'm hoping that you would grant my request to rezone it to RM18.
Any question for the petitioner? Anyone in the public wish to speak on item number 6?
Move to close.
Second. Got a motion by Mr. Miranda, second by Mr. Corner. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, Mr. Corner, you read item number 6.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I read and present an ordinance being presented for first reading consideration, an ordinance rezoning property in the general vicinity of 3511 West Empedrado Street in the city of Tampa, Florida, and more particularly described in section 1 from zoning district classification RM16 residential multifamily to RM18 residential multifamily, providing an effective date.
Second. All right, we got a motion from Mr. Corn, second by Mr. Miranda. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Motion carried with Capeen being absent at vote. Second reading and adoption will be held on February 7th, 2019 at 9:30 a.m.
Item number 7.
Mary Samaniego, item number 7 on your agenda this evening is REZ 18115. It's a rezoning request from RS50 to RM18 at the property at 8714 North Tampa Street.
Jennifer Malone with your Planning Commission staff. This is going to look very familiar. This came before you as a comprehensive plan amendment. It was part of the February 2018 cycle. I believe it came before you last June. It's on North Tampa Street. It's about a block away from North Florida Avenue. This is a Home Depot parking lot. These are commercial uses right here, and then residential uses as we move away from it. It is located in the University Planning District, Evacuation Zone E. On your future land use map, we have the Community Mixed Use 35, which is that Home Depot parking lot. I pointed out earlier, Community Commercial 35. This is Residential 20. As part of the request that was before you last year, this block was changed to the Residential 20 future land use designations. That's now the adopted future land use of the subject site. And then as we move further, it transitions to that Residential 10. So staff did find this request consistent. We did find that this provides a logical transition in density as we move away from North Florida Avenue. It's still that medium density residential district, so we did find that it would be consistent, comparable, and compatible with those surrounding uses. And I am available for any questions. Thank you.
Mary Samaniego. Here is the zoning map. The subject property is in green. As you can see, it's in a large area of the RS50 zoning district, and then it goes to commercial intensive along Florida Avenue. As Jennifer stated, this went through, this portion of the block went through a comprehensive plan amendment to change the future land use to R20, which allows consideration of multifamily density and zoning districts. The current property is a house, and then behind it is a semi-detached structure equaling 3 total dwelling units that are all legal non-conforming. Again, like the last case, when a structure and or use of legal non-conforming, the property owners are limited as to what can be done with that use and or structures. If this rezoning were to be approved to RM18, they are allowed to have 2 dwelling units total. The existing house will remain, and then the semi-detached structure in the back will be converted into into 1 dwelling unit, leaving 2 total dwelling units on the site. Sorry about that. Here's the subject property. Here's the house in the front, and the 2 family units in the back that will be converted to a house or a single dwelling. To the north of the property at 8716, across the street, all single-family houses. There's no site plan review and no waivers. If the rezoning were to be approved, they would have to comply with all RM18 zoning standards. There are no additional comments from staff, and the development review compliance staff found it consistent with the City of Tampa Code of Ordinances. Do you have any questions for me?
Any question for staff?
Thank you.
Petitioner?
Good evening, I'm Christina Mendoza Justiniano. I'm the property owner of 8714 North Tampa Street. I'm here to respectfully ask for your approval to rezone our property. We've owned this property for 2 years. We've got approved by the plan amendment, and hopefully you will take that in consideration to rezone my property. Thank you. Any questions for me?
Any questions for the petitioner? Anyone in the audience who wish to speak on item number 7?
Move to close.
Second.
Got a motion from Mr. Miranda, second by Ms. Maniscalco. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Mr. Suarez.
Thank you, Chair. I present an ordinance for first reading consideration, an ordinance rezoning property in the general vicinity of 8714 North Tampa Street in the city of Tampa, Florida, and more particularly described in Section 1 from zoning district classification RS50 residential single family to RM18 residential multifamily, providing an effective date.
Second.
All right, got a motion by Mr. Suarez, second by Mr. Maniscalco. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Motion carried with Capeen being absent at vote. Second reading and adoption to be held on February 7th, 2019 at 9:30 a.m.
All right, item number 8.
Item number 8, Mary Samaniego. Item number 8 is REZ 18118 for a rezoning from OP to CG Commercial General. The property is at 2812 and 2814 West Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard.
Jennifer Malone with your Planning Commission staff. This is located in central Tampa. 3 transit routes serve the subject site, connecting it to a variety of destinations. We're at West Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. To the north is St. Joseph's Hospital, as well as this parcel to the, I don't know my directions tonight, to the west. And then this is the subject site right here. There's a variety of medical office uses along this corridor of West Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. It's reflected on the future land use map. The blue is public. That's the public uses of the hospital. This is community mixed use 35, residential 20 to the south, and then that residential 10. We're seeing that transition in density as it moves south. Commercial general is an allowable zoning district in this area. Staff found no concerns with this request given the development pattern and what's surrounding the area. So that is our finding, and I am available for any questions. Thank you.
Mary Samaniego for the record. Here's a zoning map of the surrounding area. The subject property is in green. It's zoned office professional. Across the street is St. Joseph's Hospital, which is office professional 1. And on either side of the property to the east and to the west is already the commercial general zoning district for which the applicant is requesting CG zoning for themselves. South of the property is residential office. And then it starts on the south side of Virginia, it starts transitioning into just some medical office uses and residential. There are 2 separate addresses as part of this singular rezoning request. This is 2814 and 2812, existing medical uses. To the east is a Med Express. Across the street is St. Joseph's Hospital, currently under construction, obviously. And then to the west is a Checkers restaurant with the construction workers from St. Joseph's having lunch there.
So do I.
That's all in the medical facilities.
The total property is 0.87 acres. If this property, the existing uses were developed in 1960, 1976. If the property was to be rezoned to commercial general, they would have to comply with all the commercial general district zoning standards. They meet the minimum lot size and minimum lot areas for the commercial general zoning district to be developed together or separately. City staff had no further questions or concerns with this application, and the development review compliance staff found it consistent with the City of Tampa Code of Ordinances. Do you have any specific questions?
Any questions for staff?
Thank you.
Petitioner?
Good evening. My name is Tara Tedder. I'm an attorney at Lounge Drosdick, 215 North Yola Drive, Orlando, Florida, here on behalf of the property owner. We appreciate staff's assistance with this rezoning request. Staff has found it to be consistent with your land development code as well as with your comprehensive plan. We agree with the findings of your staff. We're requesting no waivers today. And we actually received an unsolicited letter of support from a neighboring property owner at 2808 West Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. So we would request that you request approval tonight for our rezoning, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Any question for the petitioner, Mrs. Suarez?
What is being planned for that particular location?
So it's interesting because currently there's a pharmacy on the site, but if you look at your use table, a pharmacy under the OP zoning has to be an accessory use.
Right.
So to bring it in line with what the current code would allow, since these were built a really long time ago, and to give some options for marketability of the property, we found consistent with the development pattern of the area that the CG zoning would be the best option for the site.
Okay, so there's been no decision as to the type of development that they're going to put in there?
I don't handle the real estate portion of their work. Just the land use portion.
Okay, no problem. I'm just curious if you knew anything from the owner's perspective what they were going to do there.
Sure. Yeah, they've been looking at a couple different options for the site, but again, without the rezoning request, we're unable to solidify anything that can go there.
I got you.
So
Thank
we
you.
appreciate your consideration. And if there's any other questions,
Appreciate
I'm happy to answer those.
All right, in addition to question, comments to the petitioner. Anyone in the public wish to speak on item number 8?
Second.
Motion from Mr. Miranda, second by Mr. Maniscalco. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, Mr. Vieira, would you read number 8?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. I move an ordinance being presented for first reading and consideration, an ordinance rezoning property in the general vicinity of 2812 and 2814 West Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard in the city of Tampa, Florida, more particularly described in Section 1 from zoning district classification OP, Office Professional, to CG Commercial General, providing an effective date.
Second.
I got a motion from Mr. Vieira, second by Mr. Miranda. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Motion carried with Capeen being absent at vote. Second reading and adoption to be held on February 7th, 2019 at 9:30 a.m.
Okay, go to item number 11.
Mary Samaniego, item number 11 is RAZ 18100. It's a rezoning from plan development to plan development at the properties located at 4707, 4713, and 4717 West McCoy Street.
Good evening, Council. Jennifer Malone with your Planning Commission staff. This is in the South Tampa Planning District. It is within a coastal high hazard area and evacuation zone A. Port Tampa Park and the Port Tampa Community Center are about 0.2 miles to the east. That's the closest public recreational facility, and Hart Route 17 provides transit to the subject site. Here's where it's located. We're at Southwest Shore, at the corner of Southwest Shore Boulevard and West McCoy Street. Directly to the north is a multifamily development. Let's have a multifamily development further north in this direction, this subject site. These are CSX tracks right here, and this is a portion of Port Tampa Park to the south. The adopted future land use is transitional use 24. That's the salmon color in this area. The apartments to the north were developed under that same future land use category. This is the subject site right here. I also have residential 20, residential 35, residential 10 in the area. This is the park. It's recreational open space. We did find this consistent. The transitional use 24 is a unique category. It was originally placed in areas of the city that didn't have an identifiable development pattern. However, in this immediate surrounding area, especially in South Tampa, staff has found that parcels with this designation are being redeveloped for moderate density residential, such as that parcel to the north that has the same future land use category. So we did find that this would be consistent with the underlying future land use and the surrounding development pattern. But the 224 is a unique category that allows for a lot of different zoning districts, which we've seen in other areas of the city. But we did find that it was comparable and compatible and consistent with that policy direction that also encourages utilizing vacant land to further the preferences of Tampa's for the housing for its future residents. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Mary Samaniego. Here is the zoning map. The subject property is in green. As you can see, it's part of a larger plan development. The larger plan development was approved in 2011. It was KC 1146 for multifamily development, and then this portion was slated to be commercial and retail. The property is currently vacant, and it's been vacant since 2011. So the property owners are wanting to convert this piece to multifamily, actually to single-family attached, to kind of close out the entire development for residential purposes. Here's the subject property. It's exactly 1 acre. Let me zoom in. As you can see, it's vacant. Here's the subject property from McCoy. What's happening? Okay. This is the apartment development that, again, was the initial larger phase of the 2011 plan development. You're showing the gates. This is all taken from McCoy. Across McCoy, some open storage and a single-family house. And then on the corner, the opposite corner of West Shore and McCoy, some residential units. Similarly, some residential units directly across the street on West Shore. And then this is to the north of West Shore, the West Shore side of, again, the existing plan development for the apartments. Here's the site plan the applicant is proposing. They're requesting a total of 23 dwelling units, which is allowable under their current future land use designation. A series of buildings, there's there's 5 in this building, 5 in this, 4, 5, and 4. They are asking for a number of waivers, and I'll kind of walk you through those. They're asking for 100% tree reduction. Because they're an acre, all properties an acre or larger are required to maintain 50% of the existing trees. They're asking for a waiver to remove all existing trees. Staff is not in support of this waiver. We feel the applicant could have designed a project to retain some of the existing trees on site. They're also asking to pay into the Trees Trust Fund per section 13165D because of the limited space they have for the mitigation and the required tree planting. They are required to replace the trees they're removing, as well as to put in some parking lot trees and landscaping for the project itself. There's very limited green space left on the property. These are sidewalks to the doors. So the only green space you have are kind of limited areas that would not meet the protective radii requirement for new plantings. Due to that, they're asking for a waiver to pay into the Tree Trust Fund for trees not mitigated on site. The third waiver, and they have a total of 7 waivers for this application. The third waiver, there's a code provision for building separation based on the height of the buildings and the lengths of the buildings. And there's a formula that we use that's built into the code. The height of these buildings they're proposing is 35 feet. Because of the calculations, these buildings are all kind of too close to each other. I won't go through the exact numbers, but buildings 2 and 5 are supposed to be 23.5 feet. They're only 20 feet apart. 2 and 4 are supposed to be 23.5. They're only 20 feet apart. So basically, there's a waiver request kind of to allow for these buildings to be closer. The fourth waiver is the section 27282.9 to allow the front doors of these buildings to not face a right-of-way. Again, we have West Shore over here, and then McCoy down here. These units all face McCoy. These face West Shore with their front doors, but these units, the front doors, actually face the rear of the property or actually face the existing apartment buildings. So that requires another waiver. They're asking for a waiver from 27283.12 to reduce the drive aisle from 24 feet to 20 feet. I believe it is in this area here. And there's a 20-foot drive aisle here, but they have recessed the garage door, so I believe that they meet it in that location. To redo another waiver, 27285, to reduce the vehicle use area green space requirement because of the amount of internal drive aisles and parking. They're required to have 1,673 square feet of green space, and they're only providing 1,293 square feet of green space. So if that waiver were to be approved, they'd have to pay into the green space fund for District 6. And the last waiver is to reduce the VUA green space buffer from 3 feet to 1 foot along the north property line, again, subject to the fee in lieu payment for District 6. They're required to be 3 feet. They only measure about 1 foot there. The setbacks that they're proposing, west 14 feet, north 10 feet, east 5 feet, and south 14. As I stated, they're at a 35-foot maximum height. A total of 52 parking spaces are provided, which include guest parking spaces, and they are providing all 52 required parking spaces on site through a combination of garage spaces as well as surface parking. If approved, there are changes that staff is recommending to clean up the site plan between first and second reading. Land development, because of the nature and the number of waivers they're requesting, and given the site is vacant, land development did find this inconsistent. Natural resources also found it inconsistent because of exceeding the 50% tree removal, asking to remove all trees on site. Transportation found it inconsistent because of the drive aisle width. They're required to be 24 feet wide. They're asking for a waiver to go down to 20 feet.
Mr. Cohen.
I'd like you to finish.
Thank you. And those are all the changes between first and second reading. Overall, the development review compliance staff found it inconsistent. Again, reference to transportation for drive aisle width, natural resources, and land development due to tree preservation and green space provision. In the event City Council approves the waivers, please make a motion to have the changes made between first and second reading per the revision sheet. Mr. Cohen.
We think that we did this in 2011. I think it was done by some of us that are sitting up here. But do you have a little history of what the full PD was that was approved in 2011? How did this piece fit into the other two pieces that were approved?
Okay. So this is the larger Jennifer, can I borrow your aerial, please? So this is the overall PD that was first approved in 07 and then revised in 2011. I believe that, thanks. It was kind of broken up into two sections. This section was always supposed to be multifamily, and then this section was going to have residential and retail uses. I'm sorry, restaurant and retail uses as allowable uses. And I know the applicant and the applicant's representative can speak in more detail, but it's my understanding and clear that the property is sat empty for the past 8 years. So they're wanting to exercise the option to, in effect, revise the proposal to eliminate this from having the option for retail and restaurant and convert it to residential.
Okay.
Any other questions? No, okay, thank you.
Good evening, Council. I'm Roy Major. I'm an engineer and a planner with WRA Engineering, representing Weekly Homes. We're looking to develop 23 townhomes on this acre lot. This is the reason why we're in front of you here. And to make that switch from the restaurant use to the residential was beyond the administrative discretion of staff, and so a PD is required. Take a look at the site plan here. And staff went through, the adjacent uses. You have the Jefferson townhomes to the north, which is at 24 units per acre, and we have 23 units per acre. There's higher density suburban residential across the street. To the south of us is currently open storage. However, there's some commercial intensive, some CI, and also 2U24 to the south of us. My point here is note that there is no shopping or retail in the direct proximity of this parcel. Also note that the trees along this parcel are all along the western and southern boundary. this parcel was master planned to be, a commercial use. So it was mass graded or clear cut, and it has been in its current state of basically, you can say an acre pasture, essentially, for 7 years. The kind of the point of my presentation is that we feel our townhome project is going to add a complementary alternative housing choice to the area while not adding an additional burden to the area's infrastructure. I just have some statements to make that discussion. Initially, when I say that we're adding another housing choice, I'm referring to adding townhomes in an area here where you have an apartment choice, you have high density suburban to north, a little lower density suburban. Now we're also adding townhomes into that residential mix. The concept of having diverse housing options is discussed in the Planning Commission's analysis of our site, and that analysis did yield compliance to the Planning Commission's analysis. When I'm talking about infrastructure and not burdening the infrastructure, think of the main pain points, within the city. Think traffic, congestion, parking, stormwater. Okay. In terms of traffic, a 3,500 square foot restaurant, which is a typical size for a chain restaurant, an Outback, something like that. 3,500 square foot restaurant generates about 315 daily trips. And I'm quoting from the ITE traffic generation methodology. 23 townhomes generates about 134 daily trips. And if you look at a peak hour comparison, a restaurant of that size, 3 a.m. peak trips kind of figures, ours would generate 10, so a little more in the morning. But in the evening, 3,500 square foot restaurant generates 26 peak PM trips, ours generates 12. My point there is, the traffic is about a wash. It could be argued maybe we're lessening traffic with this proposal, but it's about a wash. Parking. We meet the city criteria for parking. 2-car garages, we meet the requisite amount of guest spaces. And then stormwater, drainage issues. This site, the apartments and this site was master planned for development. So we're gonna tap into their stormwater vault system. There's currently an inlet and a pipe and a stub out to this site. So there will be no off-site drainage coming off our site into any outfall except where it's currently planned. So my point here is that we're putting 23 townhomes in place of a restaurant. The traffic consideration is a wash. There'll be no off-site drainage considerations, and we meet parking. So kind of 3 of the main pain points of development in the city of Tampa are being addressed. We are asking for several waivers, clearly. And just a base discussion on that. Our request is based on the assertion our project is in harmony with the overall character of this area. You talk about tree removal and green space. Again, looking at the perimeter of this site, the trees are more or less along the right of way. And so we will be removing those trees, several of which are cabbage palms. There's some pretty nice pines. Unfortunately, we'd have to remove those. Staff has indicated that our mitigation would be 13 2-inch trees. We may be able to place many of those trees along this eastern boundary. It's not on our site, but it's part of kind of the private right-of-way of the apartments. We may be able to mitigate as much as possible on site. We are perfectly willing to do that. Another discussion about green space. We met the 350 per square foot green space criteria. We're coming up about 375 square feet short on our vehicular use green space. Looking at the character of the area, you look at the apartments to the north, look to the housing on the east. Us being 375 feet short on an acre site, we don't feel has a real dramatic impact upon the character of the area. Another item, we talk about the waivers for the drive aisle and some of the other considerations. I'm going to switch over to our actual site plan. So the drive aisle width. The drive aisle width is 20 feet throughout the site. However, between the garage door and the drive aisle, there's a 3-foot apron. So someone who's pulling in or backing out has 23 feet of space. And if you actually measured it to garage door, there's 26 feet. I'd also point out that 20 feet, 2 10-foot lanes is a very common roadway width for local roads. Well, not in the city, but I do a lot of work in the counties. For a subdivision road, 20 feet wide is kind of the standard. So I think we meet many of the standards for drive aisle width, plus the apron makes this palatable. Transportation, so the transportation objection is correct. However, we feel we meet that. Regarding building separation, indeed, between buildings 2 and 3 are 10 feet apart. By the city formula, they have to be a little over 14 feet. Buildings 2 and 5 and 2 and 4 should be about 23.5 feet apart. I believe they're about 26 feet apart. We missed that by about 3.5 feet, excuse me. So what I'm saying is our building separation does not meet standard, no doubt about it, but we don't feel it makes a tremendous impact upon the character, of the area. Something that we have done upon kind of discussion with city staff, so you look at this area down here where the sidewalks, the entrances of the front doors goes directly to the sidewalk. Kind of a row house feel. We took out the perimeter sidewalk along McCoy, so those particular units, you kind of walk right out, you have a little bit of a front yard, and then you kind of take some steps right down to the sidewalk, kind of that urban kind of row house feel along McCoy. We think that adds a little bit of character, a little bit of difference to the area. So, basically, in conclusion, that we feel we're providing a townhome project which complements the area, provides alternative housing, has a unique design feature with that one section of row house, and does not create an adverse impact to the area infrastructure. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from council? Councilman Suarez.
Mr. Mazur, I've got one question in particular. The project itself, I'm a little bit confused based on the notes and what have been told to us. So the entire development was part of a PD, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right, so is this a new owner or is it still the owner of the original PD?
I believe it is the same underlying owner.
Okay, and so the original plan was to have a restaurant or some other type of mixed use here, correct?
It was a restaurant.
It was a restaurant.
It was called out
for sure.
specifically as a restaurant.
Okay, and so the decision to go with 23 townhomes, when you go from one type of use on a master plan to something really completely different based on the fact that the restaurant was probably going to serve the larger project for the most part and the rest of the surrounding neighborhood, and especially since this particular neighborhood is getting a lot more people moving in, why the change now into townhomes as opposed to what was there previously?
And the answer to that and the answer to that is marketability.
Mm-hmm.
Is a standalone by itself restaurant, more or less 3,500 square feet or whatever it might be, by itself has no market right now. That was told to me by the seller.
When you all were doing this plan, was there any thought into reducing the number of townhome units to allow for some of the green space and some of the other mitigations that you have to provide anyway because of the green spaces, the trees? Frankly, based on the area of the previous PD and what had built out, there's not a lot of green space at all in that entire project. Has there been any thought in terms of developing part of this, instead of 23, maybe 11 townhomes and building a small dog park or some other thing, or maybe even using that space to have some other kind of multi-use? I'm just curious because, now we're looking at paving in and putting in wall-to-wall townhomes on that parcel of land based on the number of waivers you have, because you have a lot of waivers. And when I see that many waivers, I'm always wondering what's the thought process behind developing it.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir, with the underlying, the Euclidean zoning being 24 units to the acre, which is what the apartments were designed to. The idea was we got an acre, we can make it work with 23 townhomes.
Right.
And
It's to maximize the use.
I can't mislead you, that
Oh, no,
is
I
the
get
case,
that.
sir.
Yeah,
And I think though, with the thought process was, that considering, again, the apartments, they had 10 acres, right, there's very little green space. I don't know if they met their requirement or not. I suspect they probably did.
Yeah.
And so, here we are with 1 acre. Should we account for the green space of the greater 10.5 acres? And so we did meet the green space requirement. For the general green space, it's the vehicular use requirement we're a little shy on.
Right.
But it's just, sure, my client's trying to, do the best he can. And again, we feel we're in keeping with the green space and the character of the area.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Mr. Moran.
Thank you, Chairman. Along the same lines, you have received almost a 4-star general. Three departments said that you were inconsistent. You're asking for 7 waivers, and I understand the shortages. You say I'm 350 square foot of an acre. Then you say I'm 4 feet short of a 24-foot drive aisle, which this room is about, I'd say 26, 27 foot at the widest, now between the columns.
Yep.
And so I'm trying to guess. And then you said, well, you got the sidewalk and the entryway. And does the code require that to be counted, or just the street itself?
Does the code require, Mary Samaniego, does the code require what to be
The
counted?
width of the back up 24 foot, the 24 foot.
It has to be drivable area.
Pardon
Yeah.
me?
It has to be driveway.
Driveway, not the
Not sidewalk.
sidewalk and not the
No.
aisle going in.
No.
Right. And I wanted that to be explicit. I'm not against projects, but then you want 100% tree removal. Am I correct? And please, you can interrupt me at any time because I'm not perfect when I say these things. Sometimes I err. And so it's just, to me, as Mr. Suarez was saying, I understand the development. I understand what's happening there. For a long time, it had been forgotten. And then it was recognized 15, 20 years ago. And it's continued to be recognized. And I'm appreciative of that. But the 24 to an acre, it depends what the acre looks like. It depends where the acre's at. In my judgment, it's just not a set dry 24. So you're 1 short of an acre, then one development unit short of the 24 to an acre code. But I'm looking at it and I say to myself, it's a beautiful area, beautiful location, beautiful development from your own. Please don't count that against him. It just, to me, it's just trying to put a gallon of milk into half a gallon jug. It quite doesn't look, it looks great, but it quite doesn't fit inside that. That's what I'm saying. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Could I address the
Certainly.
question, sir? In regards, speaking of sidewalk and the drive aisle width, there's no way we're having cars driving over a sidewalk.
No, we're not.
Yeah, no way. What the point was is that you have a garage, like a garage door, and then a 3-foot apron, and then the drive aisle, and then another 3-foot apron. And so what, it's
But
absolutely correct
excuse
that
me.
the drive aisle is 20 feet. There's no doubt about it.
I got those numbers,
So,
but
okay.
you don't turn around in your apron, you turn around on the street.
Correct.
So that's why it's supposed to be 24 feet. And I'm not
Correct.
saying we haven't made exceptions ever.
Yep.
But I'm saying in this case, he's just asking for a lot. But thank you again. I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Go on.
Yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I have a couple problems with this. First of all, when this PD was originally done, it was done as part of a larger project.
Right.
And we all balance everything when we do it. So to come back later and carve out a piece for a change affects the decision-making over the whole. So right away, that elevates this, I think, to a higher standard of scrutiny when we decide how to go forward. You made the comment that the reason you're here for 23 units is because you can make it work. That's the most you can make work. And what I would argue to you is you can't make it work. because you're asking for 7 waivers. You're busting through all the setbacks, you're putting the buildings closer together than they're supposed to be, and you're removing 100% of the trees. And so one of the themes that I see here from the staff is that they think some of these things could be mitigated if the site were designed differently. Then I think the final thing is, you know, the comment about the lack of demand for the restaurant, I think is subjective at best. We have seen some restaurants open in this area that are doing phenomenally well. There's a ton of new people that have moved in, and we've seen a lot of increase. So I'm not sure that the intent of the original PD really has been frustrated by market conditions not cooperating. I think that that's a speculation, not fact. So that's all.
All right. How much time do you have left? All right, you got 2:28. You want to use it?
You know, for Councilman Cohen's comment, you know, I can just tell you what the gentleman I spoke to told me, you know, and so absolutely, you know, can't confirm or deny that. You know, it's I know this client creates an excellent product. You've seen it come before you before. It's all over Tampa. They like this site, and again, the option of having townhomes, apartments, single family, I think is attractive to this area. Indeed, we are asking for some waivers, but again, I don't think they detract, you know, from the character of this project. We would appreciate your consideration on those.
Okay. All right. Anyone from the public which should speak on item number 11, please come forward.
Hello, I'm Tom Vento, 4701 Ingram Street, Port Tampa. Also the president of the Civic Association. I'm not very prepared tonight. I've been pretty ill lately and coming back, but one of the things is the gentleman said there's no shopping or retail or restaurants in the area. That's exactly why that PD was made back in the day in 2007. Of course, the market conditions after 2007, that was when the bubble burst, 2008. So we're probably getting back to the point now, after all this time, where the market conditions are getting more in line with what they wanted to, or what was going to be put there as a restaurant. The neighborhood and the owner, who is the same petitioner now, or the same person, we went back and forth, worked together for probably, I don't know, a year and a half. And they made some changes, and this was one of the things that the neighborhood really wanted, because we knew that there would come a time like there is right now where everything north of us is developed. We can't drive through. You recapture a lot of the traffic by not having people having to drive to Gandy to go to use a restaurant or retail, whatever, but mainly it was restaurant is what it was for. In fact, there was something about it was going to be a sit-down restaurant. I don't even know if that's written in the plan or not, if that ever got through there. In 2011, they actually crowded the apartments towards the road. I wasn't involved at the time. Closer to the road, setbacks, some, I guess, waivers, you would say. So that's the history of it. The history was we worked with the owner to try to get some land that was going to be, that somebody was going to eventually develop as a restaurant to serve the neighborhood. We, in our part of the that corner of the city, we have to drive north through more dense areas to get a bite to eat or to go shopping. So it was kind of a lot of foresight and I thought it was in good intentions, and I don't know, kind of feels like we were lied to, but that's, I hope he would deny the change. Thank you.
Good evening, Callie Denna with Port Tampa. To echo kind of what Tom said, there is no retail restaurants there right now, but there's definitely a need for one. And this was decided back then, and as Councilman Cohen said, since then there has been more development and it continues to grow. We do have townhomes, and additional townhomes were recently built with the Marina District, which is getting completed. There are also apartment buildings across the street from the Marina District that are getting completed. There is land just southwest of this vacant lot, and it's zoned and approved for 444 more apartment units. And Lennar is building single-family homes just south of this, 172 of them. So we're going to continue to grow and add more people that could service this restaurant if it stays zoned that way. So I just respectfully ask for you to consider keeping it zoned as it was decided back when it was made this way. Thank you so much.
All right, anyone else wish to speak on item number 11? All right, petitioner, you have rebuttal time.
Thank you. You know, having heard public input in the council, I would ask the council to consider a motion to continue this, and working through some of the comments, not only that we've heard, but through staff analysis. We're going to move for a continuance to help us get this site more into compliance and reduce the waivers.
Mr. Suarez.
And, you know, Mr. Mazur, if, you know, based on some of the comments that myself and my colleagues have made and what the neighborhood has said, you may want to go back to your client and work with them. I would suggest meeting with them to talk about some of the issues and how this can become a more, you know, successful project for you. So I will make that motion to continue if you're done, sir, with any of your.
I am.
Okay.
For how many, what period of time?
Yeah, I was just going to say, Ms. Samaniego, I think has something to say. I'm not sure what it is.
Ms. Samaniego, I wanted to speak about the continuance. I'm recommending that we continue to February 28th, which is an alcohol night. That would give staff enough time, that would give the applicant enough time to fully reconsider a site plan, get it together, give it to staff, and give staff adequate time and code required time to do a thorough review of it. I feel like February 14th would not be enough time.
Providing the petitioner agrees to that, I have no problem with that, but it's up to the petitioner.
February 28th or February 14th, Valentine's Day.
If you, either that or further down, whatever your choice is, but that'd be the first available slot.
Sure. Mary, what would be one increment out from March, from the 28th?
The next available hearing after that would be February 14th.
But I mean,
March
I'm
14th.
I'm sorry.
March 14th, yeah.
March 14th.
Let's go for that.
Okay, I make the motion that, to have a continuance until March 14th at 6 p.m.
All right,
May I say something on the motion? I'm not going to support it. I think that we should vote this down, but whatever the pleasure of council is.
All right, got a motion from Mr. Suarez, seconded by Mr. Maniscalco, and that is to continue this to March the 14th at 6 o'clock p.m. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried with Capeen being absent vote and Cohen voting no.
Okay, we'll go to item number 12.
Mary Samaniego, item number 12 is REZ 18112. It's a rezoning request for 111 West Genesee Street for the property to be rezoned from Seminole Heights Residential to Seminole Heights Plan Development.
Jennifer Malone with your Planning Commission staff. This is located in the Central Tampa Planning District. 400 feet to the east is a transit stop serving Heart Route 1, which runs along North Florida Avenue. It's an evacuation zone E. Rivercrest Park is about 3,100 feet to the northwest, and that's the closest public recreational facility. I'm going to show an aerial. This is North Florida Avenue, West Genesee Street. Here's the subject site, and North Highland Avenue. It's in the Seminole Heights Urban Village. This is the Blind Tiger Cafe, actually, on this parcel right here. We also have some car lots along this portion of North Florida Avenue, and then the single family. The adopted future land use is residential 10, that's that orange color indicative of the neighborhood. The red, which runs along North Florida Avenue, is that community commercial 35, which allows consideration of those commercial, the commercial uses that are along North Florida Avenue, since it is a transit corridor and a heavily used commercial corridor. Okay. This rezoning will allow for the, and Mary will go further into detail about this, but staff reviewed this rezoning and we did find that it would allow for the adaptive reuse of this existing structure for a residential purpose, which is supported by the Tampa Comprehensive Plan. I'm going to cite Land Use Policy 9.2.5 and 5.1.7. This will recognize that unique development pattern in the Seminole Heights urban village, and it is compatible with the long-range pattern that the comprehensive plan has identified for this area. We did find that this would be, the comprehensive plan supports adaptive reuse of these structures. This is going to be comparable and compatible, and especially with those two policies that I cited, which are also in our report, it follows that policy guidance within the comprehensive plan and the long-term vision of these urban villages, especially that adaptive reuse for residential development. And that concludes my presentation. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Mary Samaniego for the record. We're in Seminole Heights now, in the special Seminole Heights zoning district. This specific site, which is in green, is in the Seminole Heights residential, which is the single-family zoning district for Seminole Heights. The existing building on site was, well, actually, I'll just show you the site. We'll just transition into pictures. Here's the existing building on site. It was constructed in 1924, and the last use of the property was an appliance repair shop. The applicants are executing the adaptive reuse policy to retain the existing structure, but to use it for residential purposes. They're asking for 8 total dwelling units for multifamily. This is the side lot of the subject property where the parking lot will go in. I'll show you in a second. Surrounding the property is single-family houses. This is directly to the east, that planned development for a lot split. Further to the east, across the street. These are all across the street. Single-family houses. And then directly to the west. This property is approximately 4 lots down from North Florida Avenue. So because they're asking for a planned development, there is a site plan specifically that is going to be approved, that would be approved with associated waivers. Again, the existing structure will remain as is, and it will be converted from the old appliance store to a residential development, multifamily, 8 dwelling units in that building. They are providing parking, 5 parking spaces along the west property line. Part of the Seminole Heights parking code, you're allowed to count a number of motorcycle parkings as an equivalent to 1 car parking lot space, as well as there's a trade-off for a series of bicycle parking spaces that can also count for a car parking space. So for this development, based on the Seminole Heights Code, there's 8 parking spaces required. They are providing 5 as regular vehicular parking, 1 full space with a series of motorcycle parking, and then also bicycle parking. So they are providing 7 full parking spaces. However, they are 1 short, so they need a waiver to reduce the parking from 8 spaces to 7. The next 2 waivers have to do with Seminole Heights specific code. The code says is a build-to line of 40 feet based on the development pattern, the averaging on the lots. The house to the east is set relatively far back. This house is set relatively close to the west. You have to take an average to those to establish this build-to line. However, we are dealing with an existing building. So it does not meet the 40-foot build-to line. It is 20 feet from the property line. So that is a waiver that needs to be approved. Similarly, the code says that parking has to be behind the build-to line. In order to get as much vehicular parking on site as possible, they're asking for a waiver to have a portion of this parking space forward the building line. And then the last waiver that they are requesting, which is the fourth to 27-211, 13E2, the western property line, because this development is up against, the parking is up against a single-family residence, is required to have a 6-foot-high fence or wall with a hedges, and they're asking, within 1 feet, they're asking to just be able to put up a 6-foot-high wall or fence and with no hedge, because there's only a 1-foot distance in there, and that's not adequate space to plant hedges for buffering. So those are all waivers. So there are 4 waivers to the Seminole Heights standards. However, the urban design staff did find this consistent. Land development found it consistent. There's just a couple minor changes to the site plan between first and second reading. The transportation department found it inconsistent again because of the parking waiver for the 1 spot. And natural resources just had some general comments of when they go to permitting. So overall, the development review and compliance staff did find it inconsistent because of the parking waiver from 8 spaces down to 7. Do you have any questions?
Any question for staff? All right.
No, thank you.
Petitioner?
Good evening. Sue Murphy, P&M Consulting Group. I'm here on behalf of the petitioners for the owners, Nikki and Stephen Couture. They are long-term residents of Seminole Heights and some of the major pioneers in the development of a lot of the adaptive reuse of a lot of buildings in Seminole Heights. The property we're talking about today, as has been shown by staff, is this site right here. And it sits along, this is the back of the buildings along Florida Avenue. The building, under the adaptive reuse of historic structures, we're not allowed to expand the building or change it. So the building is where the building is, and it's not going to get any smaller or any larger when it gets redone. So that is really what has triggered a lot of the need for the waivers Mary discussed, is trying to bring a very old constructed, site that was constructed a long time ago into compliance with today's regulations. And obviously they were very, very different 70 years ago than they are today. So we're doing the best we can to bring this into compliance. The building was built for and has been historically always used as an industrial building. So when you look at the pictures of the building here, and by the way, there's a major bus route here in terms of like other options for transportation here. It goes downtown and it goes up to the university. But this was the building when they purchased, oops, let me get it somewhere where you can see it. Okay. That's the building when they purchased it, and it has all kinds of industrial and non-residential type commercial vehicles on it, and no parking spaces at all. They have cleaned the site up since after purchasing it, and they have, we don't know whose car that is, by the way. It was just on the property when we went over to take pictures. But they've taken all the trash off the site. There was a lot of debris back here that they've cleaned out and cleaned the building up to the, as a holding facility, holding for the time being. This is proposed a rendering of what it should look like at the end. Once again, we can't change the building in terms of adding on to it or anything. We can only renovate it. But this would be the parking and some green space in front of it. We think it would be a great improvement to the situation that's out there now. It would be furthering the provisions of the Seminole Heights vision plan that was adopted in the comprehensive plan, be furthering your ability to provide more affordable housing in Seminole Heights infill housing. This would be structured to target more young professionals, teachers, people of that in that income bracket who might need, can't afford to buy their own home yet. But there's a real shortage of moderately priced, affordable, I don't mean Section 8 housing, I'm talking about moderately priced private sector housing. So it's an opportunity to do this. The Coutures have done several of these. I'm going to hand you in a series of some handouts. One is, just I'll go through them with you now. One is the Facebook statement of support from the Civic Association, and I'm not sure if anyone's here to speak in support or opposition tonight, but this was posted. Pictures of the before and after the building, a brief biography of the Coutures, pointing out the things they've done in Seminole Heights. They are lifelong residents of Tampa and been in Seminole Heights almost 20 years. And also, I've provided you some pictures of the other apartments that they have rehabbed in the area that are all about the same size and scale. We do concur with the staff report and have no changes, no requested changes to anything in that. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I ask that I hold any remaining time for rebuttal if I need it.
All right,
And these are also 8 one-bedroom apartments.
All right, any questions from council? Anyone in the public wish to speak on item number 11?
Hello, my name is Natalia Gago. I am the owner at 109 West Genesee. I'm opposing the rezoning request. My biggest concern is the safety issue that this proposed development poses. There are required 8 spaces. They will only be able to provide 4 plus a handicap space, meaning that 4 to 16 cars will have to occupy the street at any given time. Increasing cars causes 2 major issues: more traffic on what is now a quiet street, accidents and injury to children. We have 3 of our own who may be hiding or crossing the street. Additionally, this street has no sidewalks, so I'm not sure if you guys noticed that in the rendering. So this is the proposed lot. This is our home, and as you can see, this block has absolutely no sidewalks for children. Lastly, this is a non-conforming use because the lot size is too small for 8 units, effectively putting the responsibility of the homeowners that live on that block for dealing with the car situation that will become a problem when we have 8 residents, possibly 16 residents, all with cars. I respectfully request that the zoning be denied.
Good evening. My name is Duke Mansell. I live at 109 West Genesee. As you mentioned, per the city code at 111 West Genesee, the street is inconsistent with the city code for the parking requirements. This is a small, quiet street of families. The new building is to be an 8-tenant unit. Already there are not enough spaces for the tenants that will be living there, which means they will be parking on the street and on our neighbor's property. Additionally, there is a waiver request to reduce the number of spaces to 5, as you've heard already, way too limited for the number of tenants that will be living here, and assume that at least half of the tenants will just decide to ride bikes and motorcycles everywhere they travel. Additionally, it is highly unlikely that every unit will have a sole resident. It is very likely that girlfriends, boyfriends, spouses, family, friends will be living in these units. That balloons the number of new cars on the street to 16 plus, effectively doubling the number of cars and traffic on the street. This will absolutely require the new tenants to park on the yards and on the streets of the neighbors. These changes will effectively make this a one-way street, as no 2 cars will be able to pass at the same time. This will slow traffic and blight the neighborhood, but worse, make the street more dangerous. Studies on traffic engineering are abundant, picking from the numerous studies a review of evidence-based traffic engineering measures designed to reduce pedestrian motor vehicle crashes, published in the American Public Health Association, reported that 69% of children and pedestrians' injuries occur mid-block when children dart into the street. Young children have difficulty judging vehicle distance and velocity and lack the relevant cognitive skills required to make valid and consistent crossing judgments. With cars numbering at least 11 plus in the streets with the 5 that they will have parked there, the limited parking the property has, who will be blamed when a child is hit in our neighborhood? This is a serious question that needs to be asked, and this will be irreversible once the decision is made by City Council that their own codes already find to be inconsistent with the needs of the tenants and the people living there. This I have here is an image, and this was taken, if you don't mind, sorry, wrong way. This was taken actually on New Year's Eve. That is actually, if you can count, 9 cars currently parked in there right now, and 1 less would be what they would effectively need. So additionally, this is the same road, if you don't mind, sorry. This is the same road on New Year's Eve directly in front of that building, so if you count the 5 or even 4 they have with the handicap, that's 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So you'd have to do 12, 13, 14, 15 to even get close. So this would be a more correct image of what the rendering showed with no cars parked on the street. And effectively making every night on our street New Year's Eve. Thank you.
Hi, Jordan Miller, 4406 North Suwannee Avenue. I'm here to request that council support this project, grant waivers, and allow the rezoning. The property owner, much like myself, are longtime residents of Seminole Heights and have many projects that point to their ability to take adaptive reuse projects that historically lack adequate parking and make them usable. I see this, what the petitioner and the applicant are looking to do, is solving far more problems than it's creating. That property, having been a resident of Seminole Heights since 2001, I drive by that property every day, sometimes many times a day. And commercial vehicles coming on and off of that property, if the property were left to function the way that it has historically, far more dangerous to the neighborhood. I live 1 block on the other side of Florida Avenue from that property. I drive through there every day. I ride my bike down that street to the park with my son many times a week. I just see this moving much closer to a direction that is better for the neighborhood, is better for the block. Street parking, it's a constant battle in Seminole Heights. I have random strangers that park in front of my house legally. That's just a reality. It's been a reality since I've lived here. It was a reality long before I lived here. I don't think this project is going to be inducing that problem. I think, if anything, these property owners have a tendency to try and induce alternative ways tenants could commute, could get to and from work. There's a number of new businesses popping up in Seminole Heights in the last couple of years, where you have a number of employees that don't drive cars. They ride bikes, they walk, they take the bus. This is, to me, a totally viable project for somebody that doesn't have a car, doesn't need a car. So I request that you grant the waivers and approve the applicant's request for rezoning. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Amber James. I'm a homeowner in South Seminole Heights. I'm here to basically attest to the fact that parking is an issue. It's the only strife that my neighbors and myself have. We have no multi-unit family properties on my street, and parking is an issue, and that's with everybody having their own driveway. Just because a family, guest, that sort of thing, you can't pass 2 cars at the same time. The neighbor's car has been backed into. There's constantly arguments over parking, so I respectfully request that you deny the request. Thank you.
All right, do we have anyone else who wish to speak on item number 12? All right, petitioner, you got rebuttal time.
Thank you. Just a few brief comments. Certainly, as one of the speakers pointed out, commercial vehicles that are on the site when they purchased it and that would remain on this site if it remains in an industrial use would be far more dangerous and congestive for the neighborhood than single family, than having cars from having 1 parking space short of what's required. Once again, this site is just off Florida Avenue. It's right along a major bus route that goes downtown, and it also goes to USF. We have bicycle and motorcycle parking in addition to the parking spaces. I have some pictures of some of the streets around here, and you can see that people, parking is, and I checked with the city, and parking on this is street over, but it shows that there's parking on the street and it's not causing a problem. We had parking is, on-street parking on Genesee is perfectly legal. If we had 8 spaces and we had company, we could still park on Genesee Street legally and it wouldn't be an issue. I mean, it's just what's allowed. Anybody can park on it. There are also several similar projects throughout Seminole Heights and Hyde Park where it's been retrofitting small non-conforming uses into small apartments next to single-family residential, and it doesn't seem to have been problematic. I don't know where the cars came from that New Year's Eve photo, because it wasn't the Coutures in there having a party. It was like the building was unoccupied, so I don't know where. There must have been people in the neighborhood going to other parties parking in there. That would also be eliminated if there was an apartment building there and we had a parking lot and everything done the way it's supposed to, instead of this free-range parking situation all over the lawn. So once again, we respectfully request that you take in consideration the fact that we are reusing an industrial building and turning it into a small multifamily building right off Florida Avenue, 3 doors down. And we think it's a far better use of the property, and it's much more in keeping with the vision of Seminole Heights is and has been adopted by the community. And that I'd be happy to answer any further questions you have.
All right, any additional question from council? Yes.
You know, I understand the waiver is technically just from 8 to 7, but the way, when I see it, it looks like 8 to 4, because one is handicapped and then you have the motorcycle and bicycle parking in lieu. How does that work, the motorcycle and bicycle parking in lieu? Explain how you qualify for that and what you need in order to take up a space with each. Yeah, please.
I see you looking at me, but I just wanted to
I'm
make
sorry.
sure. Mary Samaniego, the built into the Seminole Heights Code, which I believe was adopted maybe 2010, 2011, was the allowance for what they call parking offsets. And that was built into the code to allow for alternatives to standard vehicular parking for Seminole Heights. So this is the only part of the city where you can do this. So instead of having a standard vehicular parking spaces, if you provide, I think it's like 6 bike parking slots, that's the equivalent to 1 vehicular parking spot. A bicycle pad parking can count as 1 vehicular spot. So the Seminole Heights Code built into the language is the allowed to trade off for standard parking spaces for alternative transportation means parking. So that's not a waiver or anything that you have to ask special approval for. That's just alternative parking styles for alternative transportations for this specific
One
community.
motorcycle pad to 1 vehicular parking space?
I will have to verify that. It's on the site plan.
I'm asking because I didn't see it.
One moment, please. Yeah, 5-slot bike parking is 1 parking space, and then up to 10% can be motorcycle parking, so 1 motorcycle space for 1 parking space. You can only do both of those options up to 10% if you're required, so you can provide all bicycle parking in only 1 spot. And they're required to have
Each
one.
one can be up to 10%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're required to have the ADA spot, so. Do you have any further comments? Okay, thank you.
All right, is there any additional question, comments from council?
You know, one of the questions, what makes this a tough one is that, of course, you know, we already have a parking issue regardless of whether or not this project gets built. I mean, we're gonna have that come before us. But in terms of when you were all looking at the development of it, obviously you put 8 units in there as opposed to 6 or 5 or whatever. I mean, what was the thought process behind it, especially since you knew that parking was going to be an issue based on the size?
So the reason we did that is to keep the price of the rent affordable.
Mhm.
If there's less units, the more they're gonna have to charge per unit, and then it's taking them out of the market they're trying to serve. It's
Mhm.
really just, it's an economic issue at that point. So
Right.
they're trying to make them affordable and large enough to be comfortable to live in, 1 bedroom only. But, the less you put in, the more we're going to have to charge rent for the remaining to pick it up, and that's really the reason why.
Yeah, because the issues that we have is that we had to remove our 5-minute parking, warning that we had on here, an ordinance because of the Florida Department of Transportation. So now, all the streets that are not already limited for some reason, whether it's a specific, neighborhood or whatever, people can park on the street without a problem. And what we're hearing from the audience and from other folks, of course, is that there's already people parking on that street, and it's gonna make it difficult, even for the people that live in those units, because there's not gonna be enough parking for them. And that's, we're kind of in a rock and a hard place kind of situation. That's why we're trying to figure this out.
Well, I was there, I went by and looked at all the streets around it and that parking situation.
Yeah.
It wasn't like 6 o'clock at night where everybody was home. It was about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
Sure.
And there was nobody parked on this street at all
Yeah.
at the time. I mean, there may be at 7 o'clock at night, there may be cars there, but there was
Sure.
nobody there at all on the street.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the way we look at it, we can't determine
Right.
where everybody's at any one time
Sure.
at any one street, but, you know, we already know that situation exists in Seminole Heights and the rest of the city. It's not just one area, it's everywhere. That's
Well-
part of our problem, so thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Ms. Maniscalco?
Thank you very much. And looking at the before pictures with all the, when it was a, commercial business here and how they were parked, I mean, what do we do? Do we deny this and leave it vacant? Or, approve this where they're adding at least, decent parking, a parking lot, and sprucing up the property, which I think would enhance the neighborhood. It just, to me, it doesn't make sense to deny this project. I mean, it's a tremendous difference from what it was. It's essentially a historical building. It's very unique architecture, I would say. It's not your typical residential, but I think it's great. It would be a plus. So that's it.
All right, can we get a motion to close public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All right, got a motion from Mr. Maniscalco, second by Mr. Cohen, close public hearing. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, with pleasure, council. All right, Mr. Maniscalco.
I have an ordinance being presented for first reading consideration, an ordinance rezoning property in the general vicinity of 111 West Genesee Street in the city of Tampa, Florida, and more particularly described in section 1 from zoning district classification SH-RS, Seminole Heights Single Family Detached Residential, to SHPD, Seminole Heights Plan Development Residential Multifamily, providing an effective date.
All right, got a motion from Mr. Maniscalco, second by Mr. Viera. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried with Capeen being absent vote and Miranda voting no.
All right, item number
Next,
13.
1 second, please.
Okay.
Second reading and adoption to be held on February 7th, 2019 at 9:30 a.m.
All right, thank you. Item number 13.
Mary Samaniego, item number 13 is REZ 18117, a rezoning request from RO Residential Office to Plan Development for single-family attached residential at the property at 2108 West Azeel Street.
This is Jennifer Malone with your Planning Commission staff. This is located in the Central Tampa Planning District, Evacuation Zone C. There is a transit stop about 350 feet to the north of the subject site, which is served by Hart Route 19. I'm going to show an aerial. It's on Azeel. I know you can't see the street name, but this is Westland Avenue right here, and then I have South Howard Avenue. So this portion of South Howard has a variety of restaurants and some night entertainment, and then we have a decent amount of the multifamily as we move away from South Howard Avenue, which is, and then Platt Street is to the north, which is reflected on our future land use map. This is a residential 35, which is that darker brown, and then the community mixed use 35, which allows those commercial uses, those restaurants, is located along South Howard Avenue and West Platt Street. We support this request before you today, and we also support the design of the subject site and on the plan development, how the pedestrian entrances are oriented, because we do have a policy in the comprehensive plan which speaks to that, having that entrance facing that public right-of-way. So the comprehensive plan is supportive of what's before you today. And we do find that this will further many of our policies, especially related to housing and the redevelopment of these underutilized subject sites. And this is in the residential 35, as I said, and it's supported by that underlying future land use category. Thank you.
Mary Samaniego. Okay, so we are down on Azeel and Westland. Here's the zoning map. As you can see, the property is in green and is currently zoned residential office. As you know, we see a project in this area every several months. Over a significant amount of time, this area has transitioned over to higher density per the comprehensive plan designation policy direction. Here is the subject property. It's currently an office. Let me show you where I'm going here. So I'm in Azeel. I'm just going to kind of look at all of these structures in this node. So here's the subject property from Azeel. Here's the subject property from Westland. Directly to the south of the subject property in Westland is a single-family house, I believe. Across Westland is a townhome development that's within a PD. Across Azeel is another multi-unit residential development. There's a single-family house here on the corner of Azeel and Albany. And then directly to the east of the subject property is an office building on Azeel and Albany as well. This is a planned development, so they are proposing a specific site plan. The total lot is 8,000 square feet. They are proposing 4 townhome, single-family attached, rather, units. 2 will have vehicular access to Azeel. 1 will be off of Westland, and then the 4th unit will come off of the alley. They are meeting all applicable code requirements except for 1. They need a waiver to section 13-165D to allow payment in lieu to the city tree trust fund for trees not mitigated on site. They're required to have 11 replacement trees. There's not adequate space to plant all of the replacement trees on site, so they'll have to pay some into the tree trust fund. But beyond that, they meet all applicable code standards. The setbacks to the north are 10 feet, south is 7, east is 17, and west is 14. The proposed height is 37 feet. A total of 9 parking spaces, including guest spaces, are required, and 9 are be provided through a combination of surface parking and garages. There are some changes between first and second reading from land development coordination only. There were no further comments from any of the other departments, and overall, the development review and compliance staff found this consistent with the City of Tampa Code of Ordinances. Should it be the pleasure of council to grant the waiver, please ensure that you include the revision sheet in your motion. Any questions?
Any questions for staff?
Thank you.
All right, petitioner.
Good evening, Matthew Campo, Campo Engineering, 1725 East Fifth Avenue. This particular request is fairly straightforward. It's, this particular lot configuration being on the end, you got alleys on all sides, obviously, allows for, we have two-car parking in every driveway. You've seen some of the other projects we've brought before you that are much tighter than this, so this provides much greater green space and opportunity. I really don't have anything specific I'll get into. I'm just going to save for questions. I think this is pretty straightforward, and I'm available to answer those.
Any questions from council? Anyone in the public wish to speak on item number 13?
Good evening. My name is Ken Charette. I live at 109 South Westland Avenue. I'm the vice president of the Soho Neighborhood Association. And our neighborhood is opposed to this development at this corner of Westland and Azeel. The following photos will illustrate the developer Weekly Homes and its inability to control soil runoff and the inability of the Tampa Code Enforcement Department to handle the problem. Now this is located at 401 South Melville. This photo was taken November 3rd, 2018 at like 9:45 in the morning. And here's another picture of the same area. And notice all the runoff in the street. It's all, the whole sidewalk, you can't even get down that sidewalk. And this is what happens with this development, and this is going to happen with this property because it's another property that's elevated. And when it's elevated, and you take and just put the fabric that we use for controlling soil erosion now, the code the code changes need to be rethought that we presently recognize the development of enclosed property within a fabric material to control soil runoff. The present way of containing soil runoff is like handing a man a roll of saran wrap and telling the man to use this as a condom. All property facing a street should have sandbags to control the soil runoff. We need to update our code regulations for controlling runoff. We're living in the 21st century and we're playing like we're back in the 4th century. You can't even control runoff. You think a piece of plastic is going to stop sand from running into the street? That's what we've had for the 4 months. Once they get that first structure built, the concrete structure, the first level, then they bring in the wood for the second and the third level. And that's when all that block of fabric is torn down and there's nothing put in place of it. And we're filling our sewers with sand from this developer. And this isn't what we want in a neighborhood. This neighborhood has seen a lot of redevelopment over the past 10 years with no infrastructure improvements.
All right, thank you, sir.
I thank you.
Can I ask a question real quick? Sir, can I ask you a quick question? Everything that you're describing has something to do with issues, obviously, during the construction process.
Correct.
Are you against the project itself, though?
I'm against this developer.
Okay, you're against the developer.
Because this, and I'm against the code enforcement of the policy that we have in this city.
I understand
We
that
have
part.
called code enforcement on this, and there's nothing happened.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I understood because, as we do these cases, they have to deal with, specifics that are part of, the comprehensive plan. So that's why I was asking the question, if there were any other issues besides the issues that you just stated. And that's all. I wanted to make sure I was clear about that.
There's no issues with this as far, the problem is this is an elevated piece of land.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to have the same problem. We're going to have the same problem again. Right. And I'm saying to you, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
Are you going to do anything? Are you going to change this code? Are you going to get code enforcement to take and do the job they've been hired to do?
And you answered my question, which is those are issues that we can't deal with specifically during this case. That's the only reason I asked the question.
But I understand that. I'm just letting you know that this neighborhood is not putting up with this bullshit anymore.
I appreciate that, sir. Thank you.
All right, anyone else wish to speak on item 13? All right, petitioner, you got rebuttal.
Yes, thank you. Obviously, this is a construction management issue.
Just restate your name, please.
Yes, Matthew Campo Engineering. Again, this is a construction management issue. Actually, I'm aware of these photos. I've seen those. I've met with this gentleman after a previous hearing, and I did take this information back to the developer to make sure they're aware of, responsibilities with respect to, it's called best management practices with taking care of your site during construction. So that information has passed on. And obviously, it's a code enforcement aspect, which is handled beyond this particular hearing. So that's all I have.
All right, any questions for the petitioner? All right, get a motion to close public hearing. All right, got a motion from Mr. Miranda, second by Mr. Maniscalco. All in favor of that motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, Mr. Miranda, you want to take item 13?
Thank you, Chairman. File number RUZ 18-117. Moving on for first reading consideration. Ordinance rezoning property in general vicinity to 2108 West Azale Street in the city of Tampa, Florida. More particularly described in section 1 from zoning districts classification RO, residential office of PD, plan development, residential single family attached, providing an effective date. Second.
All right, got a motion from Mr. Miranda, second by Mr. Vera. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
And the
with the waivers. With Ms. Amiento's part.
Including the revision sheet, sir. Thank you.
All right, got a motion from Mr. Miranda, seconded by Mr. Vera. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Motion carried with Capeen being absent at vote. Second reading and adoption to be held on February 7th, 2019 at 9:30 a.m.
All right, we go to the last item of the night, item number 14.
Mary Samaniego, tonight, the last item on tonight's agenda is REZ 1882. It's a rezoning request from Seminole Heights Residential and Seminole Heights Commercial Intensive to Seminole Heights Plan Development for multifamily residential and business professional office for properties located at 908 East Fern Street, 6307 North Nebraska Street, and 905 East North Street.
Jennifer Malone with your Planning Commission staff. This is in the Central Tampa Planning District. It is also within the Seminole Heights Urban Village. It's not within an evacuation zone. McDougall Park is the closest public recreational facility. 3 cart routes serve the area, connecting the site to downtown Tampa, the University Area Transit Center, as well as other destinations. It is located at this is Nebraska Avenue. I have Interstate 275 over here. This portion of Nebraska Avenue, from an aerial, it's commercial uses, a lot of car dealerships. There's one to the south, and then these single-family detached as we move away from Nebraska Avenue. One thing I do want to point out is that the site has 2 future land use categories. So it does have a future land use category of community commercial 35 and community mixed use 35, the entire site. So while there might be uses on here, I believe that there was a single family home located right about here. That underlying future land use was community mixed use 35, allowing for a variety of uses with that carried with the comprehensive plan designation. So we also have some residential 10 is that orange, we have residential 20 in the area as well, and then the community commercial 35 is that red, which allows for commercial intensive and commercial general uses. The proposal before you today is for mixed use development. We did find that it would be consistent because this is along a mixed use corridor. It's within mixed use future land use categories. It's along a transit emphasis corridor defined by the comprehensive plan, which is North Nebraska Avenue. So the comprehensive plan encourages a lot of growth in these areas as well as within these urban villages, and it is within the Seminole Heights urban villages. It also encourages the development and retention of a diversity of multifamily housing types to meet the needs of its present and future population. The applicant does plan to develop the multifamily units. This would further the city's policy on multifamily housing types. That completes my presentation. We did find it would be comparable and compatible, as well as consistent with the comprehensive plan. I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Mary Samaniego with Land Development Coordination. Here's the subject property in green. It's on Nebraska Avenue, bound by the north by East North Street, and to the south by East Fern Street. The western half of the property is already in this Seminole Heights Commercial Intensive Zoning District, for which the majority of this section of the Nebraska corridor is Seminole Heights Commercial Intensive. The eastern portion is in the Seminole Heights residential zoning district. However, as Jennifer said, it is in the a commercial 35 land use category, which envisions higher intensity and a mix of uses. We'll take a tour of the property. We'll kind of look at the property from all sides as well as some adjoining uses. Here is the subject property for Nebraska. It was a car dealership. I think some folks are doing some detailing on the site now. This is a look down Nebraska from the subject property. You can see kind of generally where this property line is, the existing sidewalk, the recovery area between the sidewalk and the vehicular traffic. Here's the subject property from Fern. Back in this area, you can start seeing some of the existing trees on the site. The Seminole Heights residential portion of the property that I just showed you to the east is occupied by the single-family house on Fern Street that will be demolished with the application, if approved. And then on the north side of the property, this is the back of the lot, which is currently vacant with some existing trees. And then here's going towards Nebraska, the subject property from North Street. This is looking down North Street towards Nebraska Avenue. Here's the subject property, here's an adjoining use, so you can kind of see how wide the existing North Street is. They're planning on proposing their driveway cut generally in this location, and the only access they can have to this site is from East North Street. Florida Department of Transportation denied them access to Nebraska Avenue. Here is a property directly to the north of this application site. Interestingly, I believe last year, this was a rezoning application that you heard. This is further, a little bit further, the back of the property. North Street, single-family house. Now back on Fern, single-family houses. This is looking down Fern Street, looking to the east, where this is an intersection of Fern and 9th Street. Here's the subject property, and it kind of does a curve, an S-curve like this, and then there's also a street going down to the south for this kind of intersection. And then across the street on Nebraska, as you all know, are a myriad of office and retail and vehicular sales uses. I'll go briefly into the site plan. I'm sure the applicant will go in more detail. Let me zoom in a little bit. Okay. So this site is approximately 1.97 acres. As I stated, it's an old car dealership and a single-family house. They are proposing to construct approximately 113,741 square feet, a 4-story building. Within that building, there will be 112 dwelling units in apartment style and 1,220 square feet of business professional office for a separate use. So this is a vertically integrated use development. There's business professionals space for lease, and then there'll be 112 residential units. The building is shaped kind of like a U, and then there's surface parking. There is some parking, let me correct myself, then there is also, majority is surface parking, but there are also some individual parking garages along the perimeter, the internal courtyard of the building. These setbacks are 10 from the north, 10 from the south. East is 15 feet and west is 10 feet. The maximum height is 45 feet, which is conducive to the Euclidean zoning districts of CG and CI. A total of 131 parking spaces are required and are being provided, with the footnote that some of the required parking, again, we're in Seminole Heights, as we reviewed from the previous case, through a combination of standard parking spaces and then the 10% allowance for bicycle parking, and then the another 10% allowance for motorcycle parking spaces. But per code, all the parking requirements are met. FDOT denied them access onto Nebraska, so they are electing to have the only access to the property off of East North Street. There. Because they are in the community mixed use 35 land use category, as well as the community commercial 35, they're allowed a Florida area ratio of 1 straight by right. They're electing to go up to, they could have gone up to 1.5 because their site's over 0.35 acres. They're fronting on arterial road, and they have vertically integrated mix of uses. However, their proposed development is under the 1.5. They're asking for a 1.33 Florida area ratio. There are 3 waivers requested. The site's 1.97 acres. Again, because the site's over an acre, standard code requirement is you're required to maintain 50% of the trees. They're asking for a waiver to section 1345-4A to reduce the required tree preservation for a non-wooded lot from 50% retained to 13% retained. Similarly, because of the limited amount of green space on the property, they're asking to allow for payment into the tree trust fund for the mitigation trees. Again, they're required to plant trees as part of the development with surface parking. So their standard landscaping they have to put in, and then they also have to mitigate all the trees that they're removing. Mitigate means planting new trees. There's not enough space to plant all those trees, so they're asking for that waiver to section 13-165 to pay into the tree trust fund for the mitigation trees. The third and final waiver is just a technical waiver. They're required to have a 6-foot backup distance for these parking spaces. They only have 2 feet in this location as well as this. So that's a technical waiver request for backup distance from 6 feet to 2 feet in those instances. Transportation does not have any objections to that waiver request. However, overall, natural resources and land development has found this inconsistent because of the tree preservation and the planting, allowing mitigation to be paid into the tree trust funds on the site. Staff feels that additional efforts could have been taken with the design of the site to facilitate greater retention of the existing trees. As you can see, all of these are existing trees that will be removed on site. If this were to be approved, land development has a series of changes to the site plan between first and second reading, just miscellaneous notes to be added. Urban design did find this consistent, but they do have a couple changes between first and second reading. But overall, with the Seminole Heights Design Code, the urban design team did find it consistent. Transportation just has one note that needs to be added. They found it consistent. And then, as I said, at natural resources, did find it inconsistent. However, if you end up approving this application, they do have some changes between first and second reading, mostly having to do with identification of the trees to make sure that the trees are properly labeled and the species are labeled. Yep. Okay, other than that, the development review and compliance staff did find it inconsistent, again, because of natural resources, land development, with the waiver requested to tree preservation, as well as not being able to mitigate all of their trees on site. If you approve the application, again, I remind you to include the revision sheet in your motion. Any questions?
Any questions for staff?
Seeing none. Thank you.
All right, petitioner.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the City Council and Council. My name is John Grandoff, and my address is Suite 3700, the Bank of America Plaza. And this evening, I have the pleasure of representing Millhouse Development, and I'm joined by several professionals who have contributed to this excellent design that we're going to present to you this evening. And those professionals include Jordan Woodruff of Millhouse, and if everyone would please raise their hands so he can be identified, and Michael Mintzberg. Our engineer is Mr. Greg Roth. Our architect is Mr. Jay Silverman and Danielle Town of Dwell Architecture. Michael Yates is our transportation engineer, and Joe Samnick is the arborist on the project. We have several folks who have arrived after the swearing in, and if the clerk would please swear them at this time before we begin.
If you haven't been sworn in, please stand and be sworn if you plan on speaking.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Okay. Mr. Chair, if we may pause for a moment. We'd like to put the elevations and the site plan on this easel. It'll just take 1 second. This is an enlarged copy of the site plan that Greg Roth has prepared with Boiler Engineering. I'd like to highlight a few things in Mary's presentation this evening. As you can see, Nebraska Avenue is to your left, North Street is on the north, and Fern is on the south. A few things we want to point out is the retention will be vaulted on the project, and also the green space, vehicular use green space, which is another term for green space for the parking, will be 6,985 square feet, which is 20% of the site, is required, 6,900. We're providing 7,090 square feet of green space at 21% of the site as required by the code. We're exceeding code at that point. We're complying with parking. So to be compliant with parking and exceeding green space is quite an engineering feat. And also, I'll mention to you that we're saving the grand trees on the project, which Greg will point out when he does his brief presentation. We're paying the transportation mitigation fee, and these waivers are minor considering the site constrictions and what we've laid out on the project. Greg, if you come forward, please, and just point out a few points on the project. We have the handheld, well,
I can just do it here.
okay.
For the record, Gregory Roth with Bowler Engineering. Address is 3820 Northdale Boulevard, and I have been sworn in. The civil engineer on the project, Mary already did a phenomenal job, and Mr. Grandoff summed it up, so they've pretty much done my job for me. But we'll kind of do a walk around of the site to highlight some of the design constraints that we had. Number one was building placement. Within the Seminole Heights district, we are required to build up to the roadway. This property has 3 right-of-ways on 3 of the sides that they're adjacent to, so we have a 10-foot build-to zone that a minimum percentage of the building has to abide by to build up to that. So that requires that the building is going to be all the way to the west against Nebraska Avenue. As Mary has mentioned, we actually, after meeting with FDOT and City of Tampa Transportation Department, found that the access to North Street was going to be our primary access point and the only access point that this site would receive. Typically on a property where we are bound by 3 right-of-ways, we don't have access issues. This has become that one site that does have that. One of the other focal points of the project is the grand tree that's in the southeast corner of the property. It's a challenge to design to maintain that, but after meeting on site with the Natural Resources Department on 2 separate occasions, as well as a significant amount of coordination with landscape architect consultants and arborist consultant, we have found an opportunity to be able to save that and work around that tree and be able to preserve it. One of the other items that makes it a little bit challenging for access as well as to save the tree is the fact that we have approximately 6 feet of fall across the site from the east to the west to Nebraska. So it makes it challenging to preserve trees along the eastern property line where we're trying to tie back to existing grade, which is why we weren't able to, typically in that 8-foot landscape buffer, we have an opportunity to preserve more trees in order to get a higher percentage. Unfortunately, due to that grade back, we are not provided that opportunity. Of note, within that 8-foot landscape buffer as well, there is a 6-foot wall, which meets the code and provides that enhanced buffer from the residential to the east. As noted, we are meeting the parking code and VUA green space, and we do have a loading zone, which will provide access and for loading, unloading for move-ins as well as deliveries. That's in a nutshell. We're here for any questions, and I'll turn it over to Jay Silverman from Dwell Architecture to talk about the pretty part of the site, the building.
Come on up, Jay.
Thank you, Greg. Good evening, Jay Silverman, Dwell Design Studio, 3655 Brookside Parkway, Atlanta 30022. What we did, I'll just briefly describe our design approach. We oriented the development toward the surrounding streets. It's a 4 stories mixed-use development, and the development is designed so that the mass of the development is facing the busy street, and the development tapers off towards the residential neighborhood in the back. We developed a pedestrian-oriented design with commercial space, the residential leasing office and amenity on the northwest corner of north of Nebraska, and then office space on the southwest corner of Vernon, Nebraska, and then actually step the mass of the building back to create a courtyard space on Nebraska, responding to the busy character of Nebraska streets and creating a courtyard that's inspired by 1930s residential walk-up buildings, and creates pedestrian-friendly stoop and streetscape on that street, as well as resident porches on both of the side streets. The design of the building is to reflect the emerging nature of Nebraska. It's got a contemporary expression that responds to the commercial nature of Nebraska, but we actually took traditional materials like siding and masonry and wood and used them in an innovative way to give the building a contemporary expression rather than trying to mimic the traditional architecture of the historic neighborhood behind the site. So. That's our general direction. The mix of residential units is primarily one-bedroom and studio apartments. It's about 75% studios and one-bedrooms, and so that aids with any concerns about the parking. And as you heard, the parking meets the zoning requirements. And like I said, what we try to do as far as color palette, we were looking at clean, contemporary, but a warm palette, introducing, like I said, soft materials like the wood to make the building design friendly. Thank you. I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Ms. Jordan Woodruff with Millhouse Development. Jordan's going to come and have a few words with you. Jordan, come on.
Hi, good evening. Jordan Woodruff with Millhouse. I'm the developer of the project. I just wanted to finish this up really quickly by saying that we're really excited to invest in Nebraska Avenue. We have a project on Florida Avenue, about a half a mile away, Height, which actually just opened a few weeks ago and is going really well. We're excited to bring some activity and investment to Nebraska Avenue, especially to an underutilized site. Over the past 2 months, I've been working with neighborhood residents and talking with them. We had a neighborhood meeting on December 12th, and we're excited to have our second project in Seminole Heights. The final thing that I just wanted to mention was that the plan is to start construction this summer, and then it would be about a 15-month construction period. So thank you.
We have had several letters of support solicited from citizens. These were obtained by Michael Mintzberg and Jennifer Schwartz of Millhouse. I'd like to file those in the record. You'd like to pass them around. The couple things I want to mention in the Planning Commission report, which I think is instructive, particularly when you have a redevelopment like Seminole Heights. If you go into the report, it says that this community commercial 35 is appropriate for intensive, medium density, horizontal and vertical mixed use. That's exactly what we're doing. They include retail, general commercial, service, office, and residential uses. On page 3 of Ms. Malone's report, they talk about mixed-use corridors, and that is Nebraska Avenue. And to give you some historical perspective of Nebraska Avenue, I think it's important to realize that at one time Nebraska Avenue was a main thoroughfare into Tampa, along with Florida Avenue. Interstate 75 was built, and Nebraska Avenue was vanquished. It went into urban blight. It is what you've seen on Nebraska Avenue for many years, from downtown virtually to Fowler Avenue and beyond. That was caused by the Interstate 75. We've come full circle. The urban flight that was created by that is now coming back. The children of baby boomers are now wanting to return to the urban core. And where are they going? Where there's available transit, where there's closeness to the urban core, where there's good uses, good restaurants, transportation facilities. Heartline serves Nebraska Avenue. It's a 40-mile-per-hour thoroughfare regulated by Florida DOT. So I submit to you that they've come full circle. This neighborhood has come full circle. Millhouse specializes in urban infill. This is what they do. They did the project called Height, H-I-T-E, which Jordan mentioned to you, on the corner of Florida Avenue and Idlewild. That's come out of the ground, and it's leasing up. So this is this is the scenario, this is the historic perspective. This is what is dictated by your policies, particularly policy 9.6.1, the bottom of page 3, that says we are to encourage development and retention of a variety of multifamily housing types to meet the needs of Tampa's present and future populations. The finding continues, and it says on 9.6.4, we're to balance the objective to increase opportunities for new housing development to ensure adequate housing for Tampa's residents in the equally important goal of ensuring that the development is compatible with the neighborhood character. We have done that in this design. We've done that in this site plan that was prepared by Bowler and by Dwell. Then the staff analysis, the last paragraph, the last sentence says approval of the request would allow the infill and mixed-use development along one of Tampa's major transit emphasis corridors, North Nebraska Avenue. And finally, the city's comprehensive plan encourages development and retention of diversity of multifamily types, housing types, to meet the needs of its present and future populations. The applicant plans to develop 114 multifamily units on the parcel, furthering one of the plan's multifamily development policies. That is the objective, that is the vision of Seminole Heights. Jordan's company is following that vision and bringing this project to you this evening. We respectfully request your approval. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
We've gotten a lot of written correspondence about this project, and one of the themes is from people who say they are they're in support of the project generally, but they object to it being done as a PD as opposed to within the regular zoning process. So I guess my question is, it would be different? What is different about going for a PD versus doing this within the regular zoning? And I recognize you have a split zoning on the lot, so that complicates your ability to conform.
In order to address transit issues and to get people out of cars and using more mass transit, and one day we'll get to mass transit, the comp plan encourages a higher FAR, the 1.5 FAR. We're building at a 1.35 FAR. But it encouraged to incentivize a developer to do that, he has to do a PD. That way you have the control of the project through the PD process. So to gain the higher FAR, the trade-off is you have to do a PD. You can't just build according to a Euclidean district. I think it's a win-win because you get the density that will one day drive mass transit on a state road. The trade is you have the ability to build, and you have to have two uses, which we're doing.
How much density would you lose if you weren't in the PD and you couldn't get to the F?
It'd be at a, let Jordan's better on that.
Can I add one more thing about the PD? Jordan Woodruff with Millhouse. Our intent was to go Euclidean zoning, and we actually submitted for that originally. And then in speaking with Natural Resources and meeting with them on site, we found out that we would not be able to retain the 50% tree retention because it's a little confusing of what trees qualify towards the 50%. And so we did meet with them on site twice, and after meeting with them, we realized we couldn't meet the 50% tree retention, and that is what required us to do a PD rezoning as opposed to Euclidean. And so the trees were actually the impetus for the PD.
Thank you.
To the body.
Do you want to add?
Jennifer Malone with the Planning Commission. By right, in the Community Commercial 35 Future Land Use category and the Community Mixed Use Future 35 Future Land Use category, you're allowed a 1.0 FAR. To get the bonus, you have to do a PD, and we're proposing, I believe, a 1.3. So if you ask the question, what could you have without the PD, it would be a 1.0 FAR, which is really just, that's calculated the square footage of the subject site. So it is hard to get density, and it is hard to get the vertical mixed-use development utilizing that by right FAR. and they meet the requirements to have that up to the 1.3, because in the comprehensive plan, you have to be on an arterial, you have to have more than 2 uses, and your site has to be 0.33 acres to utilize that. So not every community mixed use 35 can have the 1.3 without paying into the bonus. So, thank you.
Mr. Cohen, that's also contained in note 2 on the site plan, and then it's in the findings by Ms. Sammiego in the middle of page 3 of her report. You'll see, please add the following note, where she makes the findings that we have satisfied that requirement. That's all we have. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone in the public wish to speak on item number 14?
Good evening, Ian Pearson, homeowner at 6205 North 9th Street. There are exactly 2 houses between me and the proposed project. Great project, it looks cool. Nowhere but Highway 41 should be there. I grew up in Lowry Park, right across the river. When I moved back to Tampa from Atlanta and Chicago, I wanted to be on US Highway 41. This is Peachtree Road in Atlanta, Georgia. This is Lakeshore Drive in Chicago, Illinois. I live 2 blocks off of each of those streets in those cities, and I chose to live 1 block off of US Highway 41. So I proposed density. I love being able to walk to Publix. I want these people to be able to walk to Publix. Another reason I chose Highway 41 is because of the express bus route. I have a stack of bus passes in my desk waiting to be used. My husband works out at Hidden River, so the express bus actually can drop him off at his front door there. He's never taken the bus one time, so I would appreciate it if we let go of this myth of people using public transit in Tampa. I'm a millennial. I want to use it. I use as much as I can, but it's just not happening. And I don't think that it will happen to the extent that we've designed in with these motorcycles and these bicycle spots to compensate for parking. So that's why I'm here. I think that they're setting up our neighborhood for failure. I want to be along this artery. I want to have density, but I also want my neighborhood not to be overwhelmed with cars. And I don't appreciate people coming and saying, you know, how great this is going to be for my neighborhood, because I like my neighborhood, you know. So I want progress, but I don't want progress for progress' sake. So yeah, as also during our meeting with OSHA, Jordan made it clear that there were only 2 waivers. She said it many times, only 2 waivers, only 2 waivers. Now we're hearing about 3 waivers, so maybe that can be, you know, fleshed out and made more clear to us. But these folks are the experts in what they call 2-tier cities. So I'm hoping they can help us understand like what the true occupancy is going to be of these buildings and their experiences in their other cities. Like, what are you seeing? How many units are being occupied by more than 1 resident? You know, you're distributing the parking passes for these places. How many people are you going over the limits you have? You keep repeating here and in our meeting with our neighborhood how you're within the code, you're within the code. And that might be true, but it feels to us, your future neighbors, that you're using that excuse to set yourself up to be a bad neighbor to us. It sounds like you're that older sibling whose parents have just told them to please stop touching your brother. And so you stick your hand an inch away from their face and say, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you, I'm not touching you. 30 seconds left. I don't know. I think that with the commercial intensive they have right now, do with it what you will. For us to change the rules in the middle of the game would be unfair. But you are asking to expand into our neighborhood. You are asking to rezone something, so I feel like that gives us an opportunity. Maybe I'm wrong for council to ask for certain concessions. Yeah. Good luck. Commercial intensive, there was something more important about that. I don't know. Oh yeah, what would be, if we didn't give them the rezoning, what could they do with just the property they have now? Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Tim Keyports. I live at 404 East Idlewild Avenue, 33604. I'm also the president of the Old Seminole Heights Neighborhood Association. To prepare for tonight, several of the upcoming speakers met with local developers, a local land use attorney, and a local architect. We also assisted Millhouse in holding the well-attended neighborhood public meeting on December 12th. We placed multiple updates online to gather resident and member input. We have several other folks speaking, so I'll just provide a simple overview. A copy of this material was provided to by Councilman Maniscalco's aid to Council Attorney Mr. Shelby for distribution. Hopefully you all have a copy of that in front of you. So I am going to let the other speakers get into greater detail. Specifically, we do support, as a neighborhood association, the Millhouse project, but we recommend additional retail on the ground floor. There was many comments about this is a mixed-use development. The reality is there's one office, 3.7% of the entire complex is dedicated to that second use other than residence. So 3.7% I would not call mixed use, although it is acknowledged as such. We would also request additional landscaping or enhanced landscaping throughout the entire footprint of the property. And then we would like the property to be zoned SHCI. So the Seminole Heights overlay, it's currently CI at the front of the property. At the back of the property, it's residential RS. Our recommendation is the back piece be SHCI. That way the entire project is not a PD, which allows a lot of the waivers to be ignored, and go for CI. And then have Millhouse come back to the staff and work through the waiver process. We would be supportive of the trees. The majority of the trees on the project are invasive species. So our feeling is, as a neighborhood, we would be willing to work with Millhouse, but we would like to stick with the CI, which is already in the 2040 vision plan as adopted by City Council on January 7, 2016. I'd also like to point out another suggestion to prevent the 112 residents that would be moving into this apartment complex from coming into the neighborhood. We did go door to door. These are the addresses. We polled these residents, and we would recommend that Fern Street be closed, that the entry and exit of the property be moved from North Street to Fern Street and close at the red line there. This way, it would allow the apartment residents to come in and out off Nebraska. It would prevent those apartment dwellers from going into the neighborhood and trying to park along the street. Again, we tried to get a very good sampling of the residents. 100% of those polled were in favor of closing 9th Street to buffer the neighborhood. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lynn Hertak. I live at 5914 North Tampa Street. I am the land use chair for Old Seminole Heights Neighborhood Association and a trustee on the board. We oppose the project, the PD portion of the project, because it allows Millhouse to circumvent too many requirements of the accepted Seminole Heights Commercial Intensive District. It's a workable zoning for the project. If it is allowed, it will set a negative precedence while diminishing the intent and the enforceability of the prevalent code. Tampa City Code is a set of rules by which we collectively agree to follow as residents and business owners of this city. The Tampa City Code is established under the authority of City Council, and it is Council's responsibility to ensure the enforcement of that code for the public good. When considering whether to circumvent established rules in the City Code, a strong argument must be made that the circumvention would be for the benefit of city residents. In this circumstance, no such argument exists. Everything the developer wishes to do can be done through a CI zoning, which matches the front property's current zoning. We would also, again, be happy to work with them through waivers. We support several of them, like the garbage trees, things like that. But the CI designation also does require 3 uses, and they only want to put a really small 1,200 square foot office. So in order to benefit or to get that CI, they need to have 3 uses. So maybe a restaurant or something to that nature. And that's what I feel is the biggest difference. Again, I could be wrong, but 3.7% of the entire 2-acre parcel for business use is not a mixed-use project. Thank you.
I have a speaker waiver for 1 minute.
Florence Morrison, if you'd raise your hand, please. Thank you. 1 additional minute from Mr. Pfeiffer.
I'm Rick Pfeiffer. I live at 1408 East Hannah. I live less than a 10-minute walk from the site and own a real estate office on Nebraska. Members of council, for years, many of us in Seminole Heights spent countless hours on the vision plan informed by zoning. There were areas where the city staff proposed changes on some residential parcels that would move to a more intensified use. The neighborhood opposed every one of them. For more than a quarter century, I'm feeling old these days, I have been coming before you and your predecessors to advocate, protect, or enhance the quality of life in Seminole Heights. We have a lot of change in Seminole Heights, a lot that has been clustered on Florida Avenue in the vicinity of the first Millhouse project. The city is repeating the same mistakes that has been made in other parts of the city. At this point, the approved developments, businesses, and locations has a real-world parking deficit of about 200 parking spaces. Tonight, Millhouse is looking to rezone the 2 residential parcels to a PD. Some say that the parcel should be rezoned to SHCI. For this project to force conformity to the Seminole Heights plan, my focus tonight is a compromise to the traffic and parking fiction being offered for this project. We in the neighborhood must live in the real world. 114 spaces for 112 apartments is fiction. In fact, just a week ago, this body approved a project not situated in our neighborhood of single family, that was not situated in a neighborhood of single family homes, that had 1.5 parking spaces per unit. This is at 1.01. The neighborhood around there will bear the burden. I've walked North Street, I've walked Fern, I've walked Ninth, I've walked Jean, talking to neighbors. I went on Fern with Tim, who spoke earlier. Our streets are narrow, they lack curbs. And the city doesn't have the funds to give us the curbs on those streets, but we have to live there. I'm proposing the closure, which Tim had mentioned earlier, about closing 9th Street at Fern. How do you make this thing work? Oh, okay. That had virtually universal support amongst everybody. It takes the traffic off of North Street, which if traffic backs up on North Street going out to Nebraska, they're going to start cutting through the neighborhood. We have elderly folks, we have folks with children. They cannot use a sidewalk because we don't have any and the streets are narrow. I'd spoken with Jordan from Millhouse about this, and I have an email for her that I can submit that I'm not talking out of turn, that said they would not oppose that, but that would have to be something that the city would have to approve. So we are actually asking that to make this as much of a win-win for the neighborhood, because I'm happy that they're coming in to develop the area, that this be closed and that maybe this be continued until city transportation can evaluate the impact of our request that Fern be closed. It will affect nobody's driveway. And at this point, that little 1-block section of Fern virtually has no traffic on it. And so I would ask for a delay for that and move the entrance to Fern, taking it off of North Street. And that actually would, I think, make it easier to protect the grand tree that was also part of the discussion. Thank you.
Good evening. Patrick Thorpe, allegedly, 1013 East Jean Street. I found a couple of the comments made this evening a little bit misleading about the mixed-use nature of this project. It's been stated already that there is minimal office space being provided. One of the bigger things is that Mr. Grandoff stated there's horizontal mixed use in this development, and there is very little horizontal mixed use and no vertical mixed use that I can see by the plans. So I disagree with the fact that this is actually going to improve the mixed use intention of the neighborhood in the future land use. The 2040 plan indicates that there should be pedestrian-oriented uses such as outdoor cafes, and within the current plan, there is no showing of that. So once again, failing to meet the mixed use guide moving forward. If the property did actually have 3 uses, as they stated that there's only 2 currently, then the current zoning code would actually allow for additional parking offsets. So it's curious to me why that was not considered. And if it's just over the FAR, then I think some more scrutiny should be given to this project. Thank you.
Hi, Ralph Barbone, 321 West Rio Vista Court. I live in the neighborhood. I'm a member of OSHNA.
I did send an email to all of y'all, but I changed the wording because I completely agree with this project. Having grown up in Tampa and lived in Seminole Heights for 10 years, who would have ever thought a company like Millhouse would invest over $10 million into a project on Nebraska Avenue, especially that layer of Nebraska Avenue? They're one company that comes into town, they follow the guidelines, they've looked at the vision plan, they've gone by the guidelines, and that is, and CI, by the way, is a commercial intensive use, which that's why there are car lots all along Nebraska Avenue, because you have to have that commercial intensive use. That is why people will bring restaurants and retail into the area. There was opposition to their project on Florida Avenue. A lot of the neighbors were saying the traffic was going to be terrible. A lot of neighbors said, oh, it's not going to do anything for the home values. A lot of neighbors said, oh, it's not going to bring restaurants. Well, you can walk around on Florida Avenue, and I do all the time. I ride my scooter. I don't even get in my car in the weekends, and I'm able to go to Bodega. I'm able to go to Madison Heights. I'm able to go to the front porch. And all the other places that are coming into the neighborhood. I would love to see the same thing happening along Nebraska Avenue. Right now, you've got no-tell motels and car lots. And that lot right now is a vacant lot. It doesn't have drainage. It drains to the back property in the back. There's 117 trash trees. There's a few oak trees that have lived through the damage. But frankly, I think they've done everything possible to attain that. Now, if they could, I'm sure they would put retail. But the reality is, you have to have the density and the ability for people to come enjoy that retail. They're putting a retail space in there that's required, that meets the guidelines. They're doing everything within the codes and the guidelines that we've given to them. So I don't see why we would be opposing this project that literally is going to change the face of Nebraska Avenue north of Hannah Avenue. And any of you can go right now and drive down that street and you'll see what I'm talking about. So I strongly recommend that you guys approve this. I respect all of you. I voted for most of you, but I just believe that this is something that we're looking at gift horse in the house. These guys are putting their money where their mouth is. They've already invested over $10 million on Florida Avenue, and see what's happening there. They're going to invest another $10 million on Nebraska Avenue, and I guarantee you'll see the same thing there. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Angie Britton with the Eva Claire Corporation, 6401 North Nebraska Avenue. I own the property immediately to the north of this property. And the only thing that I object about this project is that it was put last on your docket this evening. Other than that, I'm very much in support of the project. Every day I look across a sea of asphalt, that is my neighbor, and to see the rendering and the vitality that this is going to bring to the neighborhood is very, very exciting. I'm a small business owner. I've had to comply with a lot of the regulations of the city and zoning that was unforeseen to me, including widening my sidewalk on Nebraska to 10 feet. And I'm really excited about having professionals and millennials walk on that sidewalk rather than the prostitutes and the drug dealers. So I really hope that you will support this project as well. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Doyle Wellman. I live at 1028 Fern. I had the pleasure of meeting Tim and Rick the other evening. I think my wife and myself, we completely understand and support the development in the area. We have seen what they've done in Florida, and it's fantastic. Pushing out some of these other businesses that aren't so desirable. I think our greatest concern with the changes that are happening in that area and in our community is the flow of traffic. We walk our dogs on the street. There's a gentleman a few houses down that uses a guide dog. We have no sidewalks. There's constant young families, bicycles. Just no means of pedestrians to move around through there. So we're concerned about the overflow parking. Tim's idea and Rick's idea, I guess I don't know where it originated from, of closing off Fern and 9th Street. From what I've seen, looks like a pretty viable option. It's going to help cut down that traffic on North. People already do cut through. If you get backed up on Hannah in the afternoon, you can't get onto Nebraska. So people are shooting through, some of these cross streets trying to get to it. But again, fantastic. I think it's a great development, and just some considerations just need to be given for some of the flow of traffic and the issues that it may cause with some pedestrians. So, thank you.
Hi, my name is Ingrid Smith. I reside at 5605 North Swanee Avenue in Tampa, Florida.
So it's upside down.
Yep. I wish I could load this up more, but when we went through our years of workshops at form-based zoning, that property was actually one of the ones that we did a test case on. This is the design that's close to what we came out with as far as with the art. So when he talks about the emerging design along Nebraska Avenue, this is the first really big new project along Nebraska Avenue. So as far as it matching the fabric of the neighborhood, it doesn't. It's their cookie cutter template that they use in other places. So at some point, if we can come back to revisiting, we were the first form-based zoning to go through. If we can revisit the urban design for our corridors, they are gateways to the neighborhood. And one of the major complaints that you always hear is that the ugliness and the blight on Florida and Nebraska don't match our neighborhoods. So if we can come up with something that better reflects the neighborhood and creates a unified fabric, like other communities across the U.S. do. Also, to call this mixed use. This bottom is all retail on what we had proposed, and what the city is looking forward, what urban redevelopment is looking forward to is more mixed use. To have barely the size of an apartment be called mixed use, I almost, sorry, laughed out of my chair on that one. And the discussion about Fern was one. I know I brought it forward on one of our chats online. It does a little jig. If y'all can close off Fern, then the major complaint that a lot of neighborhoods are facing right now with the urban redevelopment is cut through traffic. Why create a problem that can be avoided from the get-go? You're already working with the Vision Zero with several of our neighborhoods throughout the city as well to try to do something about cut through. If you close off Fern and make that their exit instead of north, there is zero opportunity to cut through into the neighborhood. That effectively closes it off. And this portion of Seminole Heights is one of the lesser traveled areas, one of the more quiet neighborhoods. This would be a huge impact on them with the cut through to 15th, because as soon as you see 5 cars lined up at Nebraska, you're going to be hooking her right on north and heading over to 15th. The PD, if they were going according to code, they wouldn't need PD. So I support the fact that that was the other major goal with form-based zoning, was to get away from PDs for new construction. And this would not be a good precedent for the neighborhood, as well as for the city of Tampa, and not what we intended with form-based zoning. Otherwise, I support it, as long as they stay within.
Good evening. My name is Jeff Fuller, and I did not get sworn in. May I do that now? I do. Okay, I live at 911 East North Street. My property runs from East North Street to Fern Street, which makes me the sole neighbor of this development. It's closest where my property connects to their property. I think it's a great looking project. I've looked at the plans for this project, and I went online and looked at Millhouse as a company and what they've done in other cities, and got a better idea of what the interiors of their properties are like, and the renovations they've brought to other neighborhoods were in need of renewal, like our stretch of Nebraska Avenue is. I think it would be a very good project for our stretch on Nebraska Avenue. I fully support it. I'm hearing for the first time the idea of blocking off Fern at 9th Street. I think that's a very good idea, and I hope that could be given some consideration. Even if the entrance and exit remains on East North Street, It puts it pretty much beside my driveway on East North Street. It is going to be inconvenient, and my house will be the first one that overflow parking would park in front of. I knew when I bought my house 15 years ago, 300 feet off of Nebraska Avenue, that one day, something like this would be put in. The project that Millhouse is presenting far exceeds my hopes and expectations of what that project would be. We're in an urban environment. I think some on-street parking is okay. I don't have a problem with it. And I hope you'll approve the project. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lori Alling, and I live at 916 East North Street, directly behind this proposed project. I want to start out by saying I have no problem with the project at all. I think it's a great building. I think it's a good addition to our neighborhood. And I'm not going to beat a dead horse. We all know the problems. Parking. One space per unit is not enough. I know myself, I'm a single person. I own 2 cars, as do most of my neighbors. So one vehicle parking space per unit, that leaves a shortfall of at least 100 parking spaces needed. That's the reality. That's just the way it is. You can say you're going to take public transportation, you're going to ride bikes. The reality is that's years in the future. This newest idea of closing Fern Street, I just heard of that. I think that's a great idea. Move the entrance over. There are currently 3 existing driveways on Fern Street that when I spoke with Jonathan Scott from the Department of Transportation, he assured me there was no problem with using any one of those driveways. So moving the drive over to Fern Street, I think that's a great idea. That would keep the traffic out of the neighborhood, which is the big concern. We have a lot of elderly neighbors. I have one lady that lives across the street from me. Every morning at 7 o'clock in the morning, 91 years old, she gets out with her walker and walks down that street. Now, she doesn't go far. She only goes like a block or so, but that's her enjoyment. If you start having all that cut-through traffic back through the neighborhood, she's not going to be able to do that anymore because there are no sidewalks planned in our future. It'd be great, but there just isn't. The trees, I think that really needs to be relooked at. Maybe move some medians around because there are several oaks, mature oaks, 30 to 50 years old in the already commercial area. They're beautiful trees, beautifully maintained. There's no reason to take those trees out when they could just shift a few parking medians. Like I say, I'm in favor of the project, but it needs tweaking. It needs work. So I'm asking at this time that we maybe table this until some more consideration can be given to our issues, and we would appreciate that. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Good evening, Council. My name is Michael Mintzberg with Site Real Estate, 1925 East 6th Avenue in Ybor City. I've been working with Millhouse on this project and have worked on a handful of projects with them in the past, some that have come in front of this council before. Millhouse has a reputation of being a high-quality developer, as you heard from many of the neighbors who even would like to see changes in the project. As the project in Florida Avenue was under construction, I found this site and I started bringing Millhouse by. To be honest, not very optimistic that they would go there, just because no one's built anything on Nebraska Avenue yet. And being first is challenging for a lot of reasons. One, you probably looked at most with a magnifying glass, but even more importantly, it's hard to get financing and investments for something that does not have a proven track record. And as the neighbor said, who's bordering this project directly, this far exceeds what he ever expected would go there. And my like I said, I wasn't so optimistic that they would want to move forward with the project without a history of development on this street, but they did it, and they're trying to do it just like they would on Florida Avenue. I think that this is going to improve quality of life for the neighbors, really for 3 reasons. One, it's going to provide a diversity of housing types. There's no quality apartments on Nebraska Avenue right now. Not everybody wants to live in a house with 2 cars. Some people don't, and this gives that option. And just like in areas that have other apartments, when you give people that option, then they start to grow. They want to have a family. They want a bigger house. It increases the value of homes around it. Secondly, when Millhouse opened the project on Florida Avenue, since then, they've been under construction. 3 new restaurants opened up there. Mandarin Heights, Sea House, and Bodega. Part of the reason they moved there was because Millhouse put almost 100 apartments right across the street.
They were already there.
All right, well, we don't have those outbursts in the council chamber.
With that said, not every block can be assembled. So when you put an apartment building on a block, then there's other less utilized economic commercial properties that are going to benefit from that. The issue of going through a PD is really a challenging city logistical issue, because how else do you get to the FAR bonus if you can't go through a PD, which is actually part of the vision plan. A PD is in the vision plan just like any other zoning category in the vision plan. So I think that it's a difficult, thank you very much.
All right. Petitioner?
Member of council, Jordan Woodruff would like to speak to you first, and then I'll follow up with her.
Mary, are you able to speak to the zoning piece?
I only speak when they ask me directly.
Oh, okay. Okay. So, like I said before, our intent was to rezone the back. Jordan Woodruff with Millhouse. Our intent was to rezone the back parcel with an SHCI, but the tree retention requirement did prevent us from doing so. When you have a waiver, that is what requires you to go to the PD, and that is the waiver that required us. I will say that at the meeting, I just found out about one of the waivers, which is the transportation waiver, last week when the staff report came out, and so that is why it is inconsistent with what I said at the neighborhood meeting, as one gentleman pointed out. So I just wanted to mention that. One thing that I met with our leasing staff on site at our other project, which is down the street on Florida Avenue. Right now we have, and again, I know this is a small sample, but it was promising that we have 20 leases there right now, and actually only 15 cars so far with parking passes on the property. In speaking with the neighbors, we understood that moving access from north to Fern was very important, and it is something that we have been working on and we're very open to. We just weren't able to make it feasible. If you don't mind, I'm going to use this. We actually had the access point on Fern first, and then in doing more research on the site, there was the grand tree at that southeast corner that we are trying to save, and so that was the reason for moving it to north. We also were asked to move it further in towards Nebraska, and we weren't able to accommodate that because of, thank you. We weren't able to accommodate that because of grading right around here. And then as you get closer to Nebraska, there are requirements for FDOT because it is a state road, Nebraska, for how far the access or curb cuts have to be from the state road. And then there was a comment about trying to move the access to Fern here, and there was concerns of site visibility and safety because this is an S-curve, which is Fern right here, and so you wouldn't have the adequate visibility there. So I'm sorry that you couldn't see that. This is where it was, we were asked to try to move it to here, but there is an S-curve, which is Fern, that goes like this, and so that reduced visibility. Let's see, what else?
May I just ask you a question
Sure.
about that? And maybe Ms. Samaniego could help clarify this. Is it an option to do what's being suggested? I mean, let me just say at the outset, this is a hearing where they're actually, isn't, you guys are not this far apart. You're this far apart. So I just want to ask, I mean, is this option that's been brought up related to closing Fern Street and having the entrance and exit be moved to there, is that viable?
Upon thorough analysis and a study, there would have to be a transportation study done by our transportation department as well as DOT because of the proximity of this road to DOT. There'd have to be a full traffic study done.
And, okay. So,
I mean, the results of which I don't know. But it would need to have a full analysis. It wouldn't be a matter of just closing the road. We would have to study the traffic patterns.
how long does that take?
Jonathan, can you come up here, please? Jonathan Scott with our Transportation Division. Do you have any experience with other road closure studies?
Jonathan Scott, Transportation Planning. Transportation would not probably want to shut down the road, whereas promote connectivity and so forth. I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, there's other options can be explored, but that would have to be, like Ray was saying, would have to be explored and studied. You know, the traffic study might have to be redone or whatever. That's could take up to 30 days to look at. If that answers your question.
30 days.
At least.
Sure. Thank you, Chair. Ms.
Thank you.
Samiego and or
Yes, sir.
Mr. Scott might be able to answer this. Did we ask FDOT about access from Nebraska onto this project?
Yes, we do.
We do this every time, don't we?
Yes, sir, we do.
Yeah.
FDOT is part of our Development Review Committee, and anytime that there's a project that has frontage on a FDOT road, we ask them, we require the applicant to get a letter from them whether or not they get a driveway or not. In this instance, they were denied a driveway.
Have we ever gotten a yes answer from FDOT about any of these projects?
Yes, sir, we have.
We have. Where? I want to know.
I
because
can't
I'm
name
wondering.
one, but
You can't think of
I
one,
know
right,
we
you know.
have.
I think I can figure out that you probably wanted Vegas more than we have actually gotten approval from FDOT to do these type of things. And as you know, there's been plenty of projects that I've seen that I voted against, primarily because of the access from the main street
Right.
as opposed to the neighborhood street. And, this is, here you go, I think Mr. Cohen said it perfectly. You have, two groups that are very close together and they want to make it work. And if that one thing was done, I think that this project would be going through like that. Because I don't think that there's a problem with the project itself. It's a problem with where those cars are going to be milling about and going through. I think that parking is going to be an issue, but at the same time, I do think that access point is a big sticking point. I'm glad to see that the neighbors came here and had alternatives as opposed to being against the project wholeheartedly. And but this is something that's going to have to be fixed at some point because we keep going around and around with FDOT, and I don't know what level of FDOT we have to get to talk to them about it. Not that you haven't done your job, ma'am,
Right.
but we need to change that, and we need to be able to do these type of things to make the city better as opposed to making FDOT's life easier.
Right, I mean, I think professionally, it comes down to dueling policies. The city has a code requirement that they want to reduce commercial driveway cuts on the local streets. However, FDOT's position is they want to reduce driveways onto their arterial and collector roads because it impedes the flow of traffic.
Yeah, I got it. Flow is about everything, but
Yep.
flow isn't everything as we like to say. So, thank you, I appreciate
Mr.
it.
Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jonathan, you said that might be another alternative. Do you know of any off your top of your head?
Jonathan Scott, Transportation Planning. I mean, like they said, they did look at putting access off of Fern Street, but they had gantry issues. And I was just talking to their traffic engineer. He'd mentioned too, if you cut off Fern Street, you'd have an access issue for connectivity, and you'd have to provide turnaround for emergency vehicles and stuff. And there wouldn't be room for right of way to do that either. It's not a good idea.
Thank you.
Rebecca Kurt, Legal Department. I just want to reframe what City Council's consideration is before you, because I know that there has been proposed an alternative, but what City Council has to consider is the proposal that's put in front of you and the access points that they have and that they have legal access rights to. City Council doesn't have the authority to halt this project and close a road and then have them come back. City Council has to evaluate what they have before you. That doesn't mean you have to approve it, but you have to evaluate whether or not the proposal as it has been presented meets the requirements in your comprehensive plan and your land development regulations. And I wanted to make one more point because there's been a lot of concerns about the precedent of a planned development. And frankly, the city council, not this city council, a prior city council denied a rezoning based upon the negative effects of the precedent of having a PD, and we lost. So that's not a viable one. The question again is whether or not this particular PD serves the purpose of the PD as stated in the site plan. It's all listed out and evaluated by your staff, and you all, of course, have the final evaluation, as well as whether the applicant has met their burden to show that they are entitled to the waivers, and those criteria are also in your staff report.
If I could, Ms. Kirk, can I just ask you a quick question? Just, since I got a little slapped on the wrist there. I'm kidding. I'm joking with you. I'm joking with you. Obviously when somebody brings up testimony before us, we have to take into consideration the testimony that they have. Obviously, we did not know someone was going to present an alternative plan, and the questions that I asked, I wanted to make sure that, to make the record clear, is based on the evidence that was presented by the public and not for any other reason.
And I just wanted to clarify that I didn't think any of the questions that City Council asked were inappropriate. I just wanted, when you're basing your final decision, to make sure it's based upon the code requirements so we can support it.
I got it. I thank you.
All right, petitioner?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, John Randolph on the rebuttal. I want to show quickly where Mr. Fuller lives. He spoke last. Mr. Fuller lives here. There's his home on Fern. This is his property. A couple of things I want to remind you of. We've met the parking code. So we've met the parking code. Yes, we have the offsets. That is part of the vision plan of Seminole Heights. I'll leave you with two things. In the development of cities, restaurants, shops, personal services follow the rooftops. If you build the residences, the commercial support will come after that. It's like the cowbell coming down on the cow coming down the valley. The cowbell leads the rest of the cows down the valley. The second thing I'll leave you with is when I went to post this property, I visited this property 4 times, walked all around this neighborhood. When I posted the sign on the property, a gentleman stopped me in the front. He was on a bicycle. He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm putting up a sign. There's going to be a hearing here in December," which before we continued. In that hearing, we're going to consider putting an apartment building here. He says, "Really?" He says, "We could really use that. Get all this you-know-what off this street. And besides, I need a job. Are they going to be hiring?" I said, "They sure will." I said, "Well, when are they going to hire?" I said, "Well, I think we're going to start in the second quarter of the year. That'll be April." He says, "Once you come back and they'd like to talk to you." He says, "I can't wait." I ask for your approval.
I hope we get the job. All right, council, any further discussion? All right, with the pleasure, council. Anybody want to take this, read this, 14? Yeah, close the public hearing.
Second.
Got a motion from Mr. Corn, a second by Mr. Maniscalco. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, now, anyone want to read 14? Okay.
I move an ordinance being presented for first reading consideration, ordinance rezoning property in general vicinity of 9008 East Fern Street, 905 East North Street, and 6307 North Nebraska Avenue in the city of Tampa, Florida, more particularly described in section 1 from zoning district, classification SHRS Seminole Heights, a single-family detached residential, and SHCI Seminole Heights Commercial Intensive, 2 SHPD Seminole Heights Planned Development Multifamily Residential and Business Professional Office, providing an effective date.
Do we have a second? All right, do we have a second?
Chairman, I'm going to second it for discussion because if not, at least we're going to discuss it. I feel that it's very close, and as you heard, the things that were said on both sides.
All right, well, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? So we open for discussion. All right, and the purpose of second the motion for discussion. So, all right, then I'm going to call for the vote. We got a motion from Mr. Vieira, second by Mr. Miranda. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Okay. It was nay, 2. There.
Why don't you do, I don't.
Do a roll call vote.
Roll
Yeah,
call.
Yeah.
What was yours? I'm sorry. Forgive me.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
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 All right, motion carried with Maniscalco and Suarez voting no.
Okay.
Second reading and adoption will be on February 7th, 2019 at 9:30 a.m.
All right, thank you. We'll go to information report. We're still in session here. All right, we'll go to information report. Mr. Suarez.
None, sir. Just Godspeed to Mr. Cedric McRae. He's going to be leaving and the city and going up to very cold Baltimore.
Okay, Mr. Cohen. Mr. Matt Scalco. Mr. Moran.
One, sir, I'd like to make a motion to present a commendation to Captain Stephen Suarez, who's retired from the Tampa Police Department after 30 years of dedicated service, along with him being the former head of Local 754. He's done an outstanding job, and I'll present that combination on the January 24th City Council meeting during ceremony activities.
All right. Got a motion from Mr. Moran, seconded by Mr. Maniscalco. All in favor of that motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, Mr. Beer.
None, just obviously to everybody a meaningful Reverend Martin Luther King Day on, I guess, Monday. We have the parade, but beforehand, some folks were going to be seeking, just in case if anybody from council or anybody in the wonderful crowd on television watching us tonight wishes to help some activists, we're going to help gather signatures beforehand for a constitutional amendment for Medicaid expansion. Which, in helping your fellow men and women, I think affirms the values of Reverend King. But that's it.
All right, I'm going to yield to Mr. Pierre, and that is, I just want to make a motion to present this back date accommodation to Cedric McRae that I failed to do at the last minute.
We have a retroactive motion by Councilman Reddick, a second by Councilman Miranda. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
All right, got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, we'll stand adjourned.